is what happens when I go in cold, literally cold hands. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hello from Memphis. All right, so here's the question first. Good morning, Brad. Good morning, everyone. Or afternoon and evening, Martin, etc., etc. You all know what time it is. It is a casino, and I'll be talking about that later. All right, here's the question for everyone. Based on the amps that have been on the channel in the last 2 weeks, what amp am I playing through? While you guess, I'm going to switch guitars and let you hear the same amp with the same settings. Nothing changed on the amp, just different pickups. Excelja got it. That's the Jimeno thing. That's the Club 40. The Jimeno Club 40. AC-15 doesn't have those lows. It has lows, but not that. People forget what a good, basic Marshall-style circuit can do. Marshall's forgotten it too. The fact that I can get all that AC-DC kind of level dirt with the P90s and then get that beautiful Strat sound just by changing guitars. Nothing's changed on the amp. It's great. I mean, it can go gainier than that. I've got the volume at about 10 o'clock on the channel and the master is low so I can be in the room with it. But man, that's a good amp. There aren't a lot of amps that come in where I don't have to change a thing. I don't have to change a thing. That makes the list. Now, granted, that did not come in because it had any problems. The owner just wanted to make sure that everything in was as good as he had read. And yeah, if those are the sounds that work for you, that's about as good as it gets. Now, Greg, and I had a chance to speak to Greg earlier this week we've talked about an hour and a half. Really nice guy. He loves the Allman Brothers, and most of his amps are voiced for that kind of thing. And they'll go up to AC/DC, and you can do some Zeppelin with it, but it's not going to be the Van Halen 2 sound. But I can make some changes to one and make it do that. That's a nice thing. That you know, I'm not going to start modding Germinos, but when you get the fundamentals right, you can move it in different directions. Those are all voiced the way Greg likes them, and that's cool. It's got his name on them. But you know, it's such a good amp if it suits your needs. Let me go through we just go through the questions from the top, Remember, the ones at the very beginning of the chat are a little out of order. Then they get into sequence. For those of you who are new to the channel or to the chat, thank you very much for joining. I will answer every question in the order it comes in. Please don't ask the question more than once. You can ask more than one question, but any one question, please only ask the once. And if you can put some question marks in front of your question, it helps it pop out from the chat, so it's easier for me. And so if you ask a question and I haven't answered it, scroll up, because I'm usually like 20 minutes behind where people's questions are. Thank you very much. Is it Laos Koya or Lou Sequoia? I hope it's Lou Sequoia, because that's better than being named Laos. Thanks. That's a Buick 8 from the, I think, early 50s or late 40s. I found down the street sitting abandoned and rusting in such a beautiful way. It reminded me of a Richard Thompson song. Hey, thank you, Phil and Catherine. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. Victor's here. We can get started now. We can't start a stream without Victor. Let's see. Hey, Brian Larcy, on the JMI Plus mods for an AC30 TBX. What are the changes that trim flub from the normal channel? Also mentioned modeling drift. Would that be 220K plates up to 250 or similar? Yeah, but it's not one thing. Like if you got a 220K resistor, you can try a 240. 249, 250, whatever the next standard up value is. Like what I found is that a lot of the resistors drift high in old amps, especially AC30s, because there's a lot of heat. And so it's a kind of a push me pull you. As the plate resistor drifts higher, there's more gain in that stage. But as the cathode resistor drifts higher, there's a little less gain in that stage. And so it's not like you're just increasing gain, you're changing the response of the gain. So like a 1.5K cathode might turn into a 1.8, and the 220 might be a 250. So you're getting more gain from one part, a little less gain for the others, but it's changing the bias condition, the load lines, and all that really helps. As far as trimming the flub from the normal channel, I would suggest, unless it's a vintage amp, changing the shared cathode in an AC30 TB or TBX that's on V1, well, in sequence, the normal and top boost channel shared preamp tube from a 22 microfarad to a 10 microfarad, and change the 47 nanofarad coupling cap on the normal channel to a 10 or a 4.7 nanofarad. It still has tons of lows, but it doesn't have all the stuff below 40 hertz that you don't need. Hey, Phil and Catherine, I am feeling better. Thank you very much. I have some super chats that have come in, and I appreciate all those. I want everyone to know that while I see them on the screen right now, I'm not jumping straight to the super chats the way other channels do, because I don't have someone here to navigate this for me. So I still do them in the sequence they come in, but I do appreciate them, and you will get your time as well. Let's see. Zach Childs, I like to think he's a friend of mine, uses a Little King for gigs in his videos instead of his Vintage Deluxe. That carries a lot of weight with me. Is it better than a 65 Princeton reissue? Well, I don't know whether Zach's had his amp gone through by a guy like me, or whether Zach did it himself, or whether an order came in that said Zach Childs, and the guy at Headstrong went through and made sure everything was tight. So I'll talk to Zach about this at some point, I'm sure over the next week or two. It is quite possible for the stock Headstrong amp to sound fantastic. It won't still be to safety codes, and won't be as fantastic as it can be due to the ground scheme. But in order for it to sound its best, all the hardware must be tight. And as I showed in that first video on that, the one that came in, which was not for a name player, every single jack, every single pot, all the hardware holding the board in place, all the hardware holding the transformers in place, all that was loose. And since grounds are made that way, and it was not wired to safety code, and the ground scheme was convoluted and noisy. So that said, that's 45 minutes worth of tightening, and then you have a good sounding amp, which will be better than a Princeton reissue. It will not be better than a 65 Princeton reissue. A 65 Princeton reissue is a much better amp than a Headstrong. Leo was having the grounds done correctly. I also know that Zach does, in fact, play his vintage deluxe still. He alternates different amps. He often will do the deluxe at 2.5 in his videos, or he'll do his little King at 3.5 or 4. So I know that Zach loves his little King, and so does JD Simo, but I don't know whether they got it and then tightened it all up, or if they got better examples. And it's discouraging that anyone should have to take a brand new $3,000 amp and do the basic assembly for the builder. But I'm a dick. I have unrealistic expectations. Hey, Frank, I'm glad you checked in. You need to hang sometime. You need to hang on screen. I've invited I've invited Frank to be on the channel as a guest, and Saturdays are tough for him because he's got 2 young kids, and I can relate. Back when my life had 2 young kids in it, my Saturdays were never my own. But it's an open invitation, Frank. So let me know anytime you can do it, even if we need to do it on a different day. A special Frank edition. Good to know you got your Esquire put together, Victor. Temporary nuts, we've all been there. Steve, that's so kind of you. I need to talk to you about your 335 pots this week. I'm getting a big bunch of orders together, Mojo Tone and C and stuff. Between all the vendors being kind of closed over Christmas and New Year's, and me being kind of closed over Christmas and New Year's because of the flu or whatever I had, getting back on track. Thank you very much, Steve. And you were checking some of your outlets in your music room and noticed they have open grounds. Outside of the safety hazards are open grounds for bad for tube amps. Voltages are in the 128 range. 128 is really high, to the point where I would really suggest we get you a Variac or an uninterruptible power supply, or some other option, maybe a brown box, so you can keep it from not exceeding 120. Second of all, it is a very serious safety hazard for you, and you need to make sure that you have ground for that reason alone. But yes, an amp is much noisier without a safety ground, because it means the chassis is not truly at ground, and so it's not providing adequate shielding from environmental noise. And every day there is more electronic environmental noise in our lives. So please, please, please get an electrician out there and see if the wire is just not connected in the outlet, or if you need to identify which outlets you have access to which are grounded, and run an extension cable if nothing else. Yeah, that's the made in China casino where I changed all the hardware and the pickups. So it's got Fralin P90s and a Faber bridge and CTS, real CTS pots and all that fun stuff. Switchcraft switch and jack, because I can. The stock ones don't sound that way, but it sounds very nice now, and I have a lot less in it than I would if I were to buy, say, one of the linen revolutions from 20, 30 years ago. Those cost as much or more than an actual one from like 65, 66. Gringo Pig, I've got you looking at Vox AC15 hand-wired amps. Well, damn it. Well, if you get one, I showed how to make it right. It's a pretty good amp. You could have any local tech make those 4 or 5 little changes I mentioned, and then it's a good amp. I just don't know that... actually, I do know. It's not anyway a better amp than the AC30 or AC15 Custom, which costs considerably less. Now, the hand-wired cab is prettier, and it's plywood instead of 18 layers of plywood, so it weighs a little bit less. The only thing I will say that makes the hand-wired a little bit better is that they have a true tree branch power supply, where every node is coming straight off the screen node with individual resistors, as opposed to the custom, which uses a more traditional Fender Marshall style ladder, where you have the screen node and then it has a dropping resistor, goes to the phase inverter, dropping resistor going to this preamp node, the dropping resistor going to this preamp node. So you end up having, I can't draw it with my fingers, which works, but it's not the same feel. And when I mod a custom series, that's one of the things I do is I go in there and change that behind the board. But yeah, the older hand-wired, as Brad points out, their cab was really heavy, and the custom cab is really heavy, and the new one is not light. It's equivalent in output level, kind of, sort of, to a deluxe reverb, but a deluxe reverb typically weighs less. But the Vox cab is just so damn pretty. Well, the Casino's a better guitar than the Dots that they're making. I'm not sure why. Well, I haven't played some of the new 335 and et cetera Epiphones, which have the Gibson style headstock. Maybe they're making some improvements everywhere, but traditionally the Dots always had some problems. So has the Riviera, as far as the Epiphone standard models go. And remember, the bridge on those things across the board is absolute junk. You have to change out the bridge. I do make amps from time to time, but it's rare, and I'm not doing it right now. And it's not like I've got a line of amps at some music store somewhere. Now, to those who guessed wrong as to which amp you're hearing, I could have gotten similar sounds from a Vox, though the low end would not be the same. And there'd be a little bit more of a mid-range thing happening. And but there's a lot of overlap between a Vox and a Marshall style circuit when it comes to the earlier 60s and early 70s sounds. What do you call it? The the Bravado would get very different sounds from that. A lot fuller. It's more of a super reverb style circuit with an added multi-position bright switch, like a normal channel of a super reverb. The Little King could never get that sound. Princeton just doesn't do that. Princeton squashes and kind of falls apart and farts in cool and useful ways, but it's very different. That Strat sound was perfection. Thanks, Jaguar. Yes, please. Or Jaguar. Yeah, that's the K-line Springfield with the K-line pickups that Chris is making now. And I put this up against Lawlers and stuff. This just sounds great. It's like 6 pounds or less. It's roasted pine, roasted maple neck. This thing, I didn't want to buy this. I was reviewing it, and I'm not even a big fan of the headstock shape or the logo. I was not going to buy this guitar. Chris asked me to check out his new pickups, so I agreed to take one home and do a review. And damn it, I had to buy the damn thing. After I had it for a month, I realized that I didn't want to send it back, despite the things that are wrong with it from my perspective. The right stuff is just so damn right. And so that's straight into that Germino. Let's see, I've got presence at about 2 o'clock because he voices his amp kind of dark. I've got the bass about 10 o'clock, mids about 1:30, treble about 2 o'clock. That's on the bright channel, and that volume's at about 10 o'clock. So that's just most Marshalls. I turn the presence down to about 10 o'clock, and maybe the presence down to like 1 o'clock or noonish, because most Marshalls have a bright cap on that channel. This amp doesn't have a bright cap on the channel. Well, it has a bright cap across the mixer. The mixer stage doesn't have the bright cap on the volume pot. So, and it just sounds beautiful. And that's through the ET65 with the Royer on it. And into a little Motu M2. So inexpensive mic pre, that's for sure. Though I am using some plug-in zhuzh stuff, a Sheps plug-in and a LA2A plug-in. But I'm doing very little with either of those. Hey, Matthew. The Headstrong Princetons follow the originals, don't have an HT fuse. Do they need one? Where would I put one if I were to include one in a new build? Many thanks. No, they don't have one, and I don't think they really need one. The Princetons typically are fine as Leo built them. If you're going to put an HT fuse in one, I would suggest doing it between the reservoir node and the choke, just so if anything went wrong, there you go. But there's still, well, you can just do it right before the. If you put a fuse before on a tube rectified amp, if you put a fuse between the rectifier and the first cathode stage, there can be some inrush current. You'll get false trips, fuse blows. So if you must do it, you can just do it between the reservoir stage and the output center tap / choke connection. See, all you disingenuous dickheads with selective memory, Lyle doesn't hate all amps. Right, I mean, it's cartoonish, but people out there are nuts, and they hear what they want to hear, and they take away what they want to take away. In the video the other day, where I mentioned that for new people that I have hand and finger damage, and I don't come to my channel for blazing chops, that doesn't negate everything I've learned about guitar just because I can't go anymore. I said, considering that, what else? I play guitar. I think I said I didn't say I play guitar. I said I play better than Leo Fender or Jim Marshall, who were a non-musician and a drummer, respectively. And one dickhead, who's now no longer on the channel, said, "You think you play better than Jim Marshall? Jim Marshall was a jazz drummer. He played with all the greats, blah, 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 blah." I'm like, okay, you don't understand what the word respectively means. And yes, I play guitar better than Jim Marshall played guitar. But to cherry pick, and just in order to, and he called me a big-headed idiot, and so he went away, not because I was offended, but because he's an unpleasant shithead who can't understand what words mean, and I don't think he was going to bring anything of value to the rest of us. Hey, Jaguar, I heard the modern Accutronics reverb tanks aren't as good. Well, they don't sound as good because they're really dark and really long in terms of the sound compared to the old ones, but they also don't last. What reverb tank would I recommend for a 70s Princeton reverb? I like the Mojo Tone medium decay. And if you live in Europe, TAD and MOD also make a medium decay, which is very, very similar to the Mojo Tone. All those are better choices than the Accutronics. They're better build quality. And the current medium decay sounds more like the old Gibbs Accutronics long decay. So don't be thrown off by the medium versus long. It's a 2AB C1 whatever. It's the 2-spring medium decay tank that works for the Fender circuit with the 8 or 10 own input and the 2250 output, whatever it is. Brad's gonna remember all that. All the numbers better than I do. Numbers come in and they just go out. Any experience with Mad Amps? No, I've read about them, but I've never had one in my place. I've only had one vintage orange in ever. I've only dealt with the current versions of orange. I've not had any Mad Amps. Sorry. Thank you very much, Scott. My goal this year is to build a tube amp, head only. Any suggestions on a first project? Should I start simple and learn the limitations of that circuit as a bridge to a second project? Thanks for all I do. Well, thanks for being here, Scott, and thanks for the super chat. I would say, if you have not already, start with pedals. Make all your mistakes, learn how circuits work, learn how to solder at 9 volts, where nothing's going to kill you and nothing's going to catch on fire. And if you make a mistake, you're out $40-$60 versus $400-$600. But if you've already been building pedals and you know how to solder well and you're confident in your ability to do that and to hopefully read a schematic, if not at least very strictly adhere to a layout, I would suggest building a 5E3 Deluxe. You can build one in a head version. Many people would say a Champ, and a Champ's a good choice as well, but I find that the work to build a Deluxe is not much more than building a Champ, and you get a more versatile amplifier at the end of it. So the 5E3 Deluxe is pretty simple to build. The trouble with making those suggestions is that most people are going to then go buy the 5E3 or Deluxe 583 Deluxe or the Champ kit, the tweed version, and that comes in a little hang-down U-shaped chassis. It's really hard to work in those chassis, and you can certainly build that circuit in a traditional head box with a lot more real estate that would lay flat like in a Marshall. But most people are copying layouts, and the layouts are going to be for the old tweed style layout. So maybe, given that, if there, used to back in the day, I could send you to the AX 84 or 34 form, whatever it is. There are an awful lot of variants of the Marshall 18 watt that would be good first builds. If you could find a Marshall 18 watt variant that did not have the tremolo circuit, because the tremolo circuit's very complicated and sounds like shit. So if you the issues that you want to do in a head, and there aren't any good head versions of the tweed thing that I found. I mean, you can get a head box that'll take a tweed chassis. I think Motortone might have some, but that's what I'd look at. But the Tweed Deluxe or Marshall 18 watt would be the most versatile. A basic Champ would be the simplest. Hey, Magic Music. My thoughts on the Mesa Fillmore series. I purchased a 50 combo and find it to be a deluxe reverb killer. Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I hope it lasts forever for you. I would doubt that it will, based on my experience with Mesas. I have seen so much bullshit done by Mesa that just bends their customers over. I have no respect for the company, pre-Gibson or now. I have never played a Mesa who's clean at all compared with a good Fender. Most Mesa cleans go shh. And I found an awful lot of Mesa owners who don't know that their amp sounds bad because they bought the very expensive thing that they've had 20 years of ads telling them is great. B, they're coming from a Blues Junior, or they're coming from a modeling thing, or they're coming from a solid state thing. And so in comparison, maybe the Mesa does sound great. I think after the Mesa Fillmore is written about in the past tense, and hey, Mesa made an amp called the Fillmore for 7 years, people will still be playing deluxe reverbs. I could be wrong. I just don't know. Thank you very much, Signamutt. Appreciate that. Sash, did Signamutt have a question? I don't see one yet, but if I get one, I will certainly answer it. Hey, Sash, working on a friend's AC30C2. The reverb doesn't work, but I have no idea if it's the tank itself or within the circuit. How would I go about verifying the tank itself, EL84 brand, to use in this amp? It's almost always going to be the tank in the C2, because the C2 is very has got a very simple, high quality op amp based circuit, and there's not much that's going to go wrong with the circuit. Could be a pot, because pots are pots, but I think you should look at the tank. And as far as the tank itself, it is, I'll get you that. I'm calling that up. EL84 brand. I like JJ's. There's nothing fancy about them, but they sound good and they're reliable and they work well in the boxes. Electro-harmonixes are good too. So let's see here. tubesandmore.com, because that's the place you can get them. And let's see. Browse our products. Reverb tanks. There they are. All right, so we're going to go with MOD. We're going to go with 2 springs. We're going to go long. And then it's going to be one of the 4 EB series. Or 8 EB series. I always forget which one of those. Here we go. SCC, is that also C? Let's see. I think I've got it for you. Yeah. Here you go. All right. Sash, I'm popping this down in the chat right now. That should work just fine. Groovy, Victor. The broadcaster pickup is a good sounding pickup. I like it more than the 53. I switched the 53 out for the broadcaster in mine. I like it a lot. What's my opinion on Hammond transformers? Use some for Fender replacements in my builds, and they sound really good and reasonably priced. Usually they are, and I have used them quite a bit, and I don't have any problem with them when they operate correctly. But there was last time I ordered a Hammond choke. It was a drop-in choke for a Fender, and that's been a consistent part for decades. And Hammond changed something in their supply chain, and it was the same part number that I'd used before, and the same part number said it was this model, and the same part number, that same part had dimensions published that did not match the actual product. The actual product was, the hole locations were off by like a 1/4 inch, and it was not a drop-in replacement. And there was nothing in the literature to say what had changed. So slight caveat, be ready that you may get something's happening with their supply. And if you order something and it doesn't fit, don't make it fit. Get something else. But when it is the correct part and you can get the correct part, the Hammond stuff is very, very good. Hey, Johan Janssen, looking for a high-quality blackface amp for cleans. The custom Deluxe Reverb 64 sounds the best to me, but concerned about quality and Fender lying about parts. You should be concerned. The quality is very poor. They are lying about parts. Those blue molded caps are cheap little standard generic caps that are covered in blue plastic with the Fender logo on it, as if it doesn't even look like the old ones. The standard Deluxe Reverb reissue, the 65 reissue, is a much better amp, and you can get them used for very good prices. And I have 3 or 4 dozen videos up on showing how to make them very reliable for very little money. A lot of the problems with the 65 reissue is the speaker, because they shipped either with the generic Eminence made special design for Fender speakers back in the day, and then they shipped with the C12K, which is one of the worst sounding speakers in the world. So you get a 65 reissue, put $200 worth of reliability upgrades into it, and change out for another $100 speaker, and almost any speaker sounds better than the C12K. You're going to have a better amp than the 64 Reverb, and you'll have enough money left over to buy a guitar. Gregor, I'll be looking at my email this afternoon. Thank you. Hey, that guitar guy, I can't tell you which train wreck to get because there's a whole bunch of different models that Ken made, and he was making them to get very different things for different players. And so that's like saying you like strawberry, but your friend would like vanilla. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with any of them. They all do different things. So ideally, you would go and play one or hear one. That's unlikely to happen. So watch as many videos as you can. Find the guys who play guitars similar to yours, who play styles similar to what you play, who get the sounds that you want to get. Find out what model they have and go that way. Never worked on a Comet. Sorry, hello, Cleveland. Is it possible to add a master volume to a Trainwreck style amp? Yeah. Ken famously published like 4 or 5 different master volume style things. And people are still like, is that a style too? I'm like, I don't know. I know the name of the circuit, not what Ken called it in his little article. But yeah, most people out there are going to stick a cross line in a Trainwreck style amp and have very subpar results. Just put a Larmar in there and call it a day. And I've got videos on the Larmar and how to install them on Marshalls and Fenders and all kinds of stuff. Same thing for a Trainwreck. Sean Eric Brooks, I have a Deluxe Reverb and love the way it sounds with my pedals, but once you get past 4.5 on the volume and it starts to break up, I don't like it. Should I get a twin or a super for headroom? You can. That's pretty much what a deluxe does. You get to a point and then it doesn't have any more headroom. But 4.5 on a deluxe is plenty loud. Before you buy another amp, if you already have that amp and you like the sound of that amp, that's a 1x12. Beg, borrow, don't steal a 2x12 and run it into that at the same time. Get an 8 ohm or 16 ohm 2x12 cab, plug into that and the internal at the same time. You're going to be about as loud as you be with the super reverb, maybe almost as loud as you be with the twin. And it'd be something that for large gigs, you take the 2x12, stick the deluxe on top. For small gigs, you just take the deluxe reverb. It costs less than buying a second amp. It takes up less space in the house, and it's kind of cool. You have a little mini stack. Try it before you buy something else. Because the twin reverb behaves very differently than the deluxe reverb, and a super reverb behaves very differently than the deluxe reverb. They're not larger, louder versions of each, or quieter, smaller versions of each other. There are Fenders in the traditional lineup that are larger and smaller versions of each other, but those three are very different amps. Yeah, Steve, I'll call you today or tomorrow. We'll talk about those pickups, and we'll talk about your options for your room. It doesn't do any good for me to work on these amps for you if your chassis aren't grounded. You're going to have zzz at all times. Hey, Count Domingo, don't worry about hi-fi sounding preamp tubes. It's a twin reverb. Just for V1, V2, V4, and V1, V2, and V4 get some electro-harmonic 7025s. For V3 and V6, get some joint Army Navy new old stock 12 AT7s that they have at Tube Depot for about the same price as a current production tube. And for V5, just use whatever 12EX7 you already have, because that's just in the oscillator. Did I go see the Black Keys yesterday? No, I could not name a Black Keys song if paid. Sorry. Well, I understand what you're saying, but the regular version is A, not that likely to have problems that require deep maintenance, other than, eventually it'll need to recap. B, it's not any harder to fix one of the current productions than to fix the hand-wired, especially when it comes to that Fender 64 Custom. The eyelets are really just bad quality PCB. Well, Mojotone's assemblers are not great. Typically, they're good. Could use some tweaking afterwards. But yeah, I think given the huge price difference, I'd take a chance on the Mojotone assembled kit. And then take it, get one and then have a local tech go through it and make sure they did it all right. It shouldn't be necessary in this day and age, but it is. Yeah, it was 66 Princeton that was recapped in 2000. When will the next cap be expected? I would say in 2015 or 2020 is when I would have someone look at it, because caps have a 15 to 20 year life expectancy, typically. Now, that varies. If the amp is kept off for a number of years, the caps are going to last less time. If it's used all the time, the caps are going to last longer. Sometimes caps will say, screw you, Fax, I'm going to last 45 years. It's very, very rare. The trouble is when caps get over 20 years, it's not like they go from, hey, it's perfect to, hey, it sounds a little weird. Sometimes they go from, hey, it's perfect to, hey, it's on fire. So, I would have someone look at it. Just because you will usually see little warning signs, little warts forming on the inside of the cap, or you can measure for ripple. Sometimes people live with a lot of noise. Amps come in all the time, and I'm like, how did they not know this was a problem? They'll say, hey, it's doing this thing, and it does that thing, but they're like, did they not know that it's not normal for the amp to always go, So people think old amps are supposed to be noisy, that vintage equals noisy, and it's just not. How would I say the older Custom Classic boxes compared to the newer ones on your second and 11th? Thanks a lot. Well, the Custom Classics were good amps. The Custom Series is a much better amp. The FX loop on the Custom Classic, when the output coupling cap was fixed, was more versatile than the FX loop in the Custom. But other than that, the reverb is better on the Custom, the tremolo is better on the Custom, the sound's better on the Custom. Though the Custom Classic can be made to sound fantastic, it takes a lot more work, and I don't like the way it was constructed as well. Yeah, I pick up twins and SVTs and stuff fairly commonly. It's a good thing I'm a big guy by nature, but yeah, people are always like, it's 27 pounds. Well, put on a weight belt and ask your daughter to carry it for you. That sounded sexist. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I don't know why that came out of my mouth. I don't think that way, but when treating rust spots on the chassis with WD-40, should I avoid getting any on the transformers? Won't hurt, but I don't spray it all over the chassis. I'll spray it on a cloth, or I'll spray it on a very small spot. I've got a thing of WD-40 that if I barely touch it, it just kind of drizzles out. I'll spread it with my finger. I can control where it goes, but it won't hurt if it gets on the transformers. Hey, Alec Boyas, no experience with the newer Bad Cats, PCB or otherwise. What manufacturer and model picofarad bright caps do I recommend? Hey, Chad Anthony the Reaper. I quite like the 562R series by Vishay. They're ceramic, they're class 2, they're rated for 1,000 volts, and they sound right. They're relatively inexpensive. They look awesome, and I've not had any issues with them whatsoever. There was a C1, Lord Graga, but I've not seen it very commonly. I think it was replaced by the S1, and so they didn't want to have competing. Just pick up one of the AC30C H models. That's the head version of the AC30 Custom. It's a great sounding amp. Well, the S1 is not the same thing as the C series. The S series is using some LND 150s, and I've not had one in beyond to verify. I suspect they're doing it much like they're doing in that AC10 handwired I showed the other day, where they're probably doing a LND 150 and they're doing a plate-driven tone stack just to make it simple. That's the kind of thing that they're doing in the AC10 Custom as well. Happy belated birthday, Wes. And Excelja. I'm coming up next month. Turning 38. Oh my gosh. Hey, Dan Brock. I'm sure the Synergy stuff has got to actually be looked at by the other people involved in Synergy. And I don't know if all the Morgan amps are bad. People love the 20. I've not tried their Voxstall stuff. I've just had like 5 of the Princeton thing come in, and those things were absolute shit shows. So while I statistically don't expect much from any of the Morgans, I'd love for them to have one model that they accidentally got right. It's not going to be designed. It's just going to be a happy accident. Regarding loose parts on amps, I recommend using Loctite. Loctite is rarely necessary. If I'm using a nylock nut or a Keps nut, it's not, once it's properly tightened, it's not going to go anywhere. Maybe on a kept not holding a transformer in place, afterwards I might put some blue Loctite just to make sure that it can't vibrate if the chassis starts to flex down the road. Now, when I do like uh, a tweed amp, and a lot of you'll see on my channel occasionally the 50s tweeds come in where the little grommets that hold the sockets in place have all corroded, and I remove those and I put in some new silicone grommets. And then I'll put the hardware back in place, and that's just a nut. I use red fingernail polish to fix that so it cannot vibrate. And the same thing the Fender did back in the day. But in general, I'm not Loctiting much. Maybe if I were doing more PCB amps, any screws that machine screws that are holding PCB to standoffs, I might put some Loctite on those threads. Or maybe just between the screw head and the washer and the board. But I've never really felt the need. I've usually find a little bitty tooth washer grabs in that fiberglass, or hopefully grabs on the soldered tinned metal pad on the PCB for that. Hey, Progress Pedals. $200 as is. Yeah, it's going to be something that's going to cost more than $200 to fix in that. I'm glad you're enjoying your modded 5F6A. Hey, Arno. We would consider buying a WGS G12Q for narrow panel Tremolux clone. Do I have any experience to share about this speaker? Thanks very much. I've not tried their G12Q. I imagine it's very good. Usually when I'm going after the Alnico era stuff, I tend to go Weber, just because I have more experience with them. But I would be glad to try a G12Q. I actually have one up there. Someone gave me a 8 or 10 inch Q amp, and it's magnets like that big, and it's 4 ohms. I've not found an amp for it, but someday an amp will come in that needs a speaker, and that speaker will be the right match. I've not tried them though. Sorry, I know. I quite like the Weber for a narrow panel Tremolux. I might suggest the Weber 12A 125 or the 125B. But if you can get a good price on the WGS versus the Weber, I've never played a WGS that was bad. Hey, Bill Morgan, can I give my thoughts on changing bypass cap values in traditional black silver era Fenders? What do I get? Worth it? Can you change with the bass control effects? I can. I choose not to control with the bass. I don't change what the bass control does because it's good. And I don't believe in changing bypass cap values except in the Princeton, because the Princeton, they're swamping their cathode follower. But you're probably not talking about the Princeton. You're probably talking about twins and supers and stuff. If it needs to be changed because it's a defective part, there are a lot of good caps out there, but it rarely needs to be changed. Sometimes the ceramic discs need to be changed, in which case I use the Vishay 562R series, like I mentioned earlier. The thing about the Fenders that you need to remember is depending on the year, especially as the silver panel models came out, they started using different tapers for the bass pot sometimes. Sometimes they would use a linear on the bass, in which case they get really woofy. Change that back to an audio, and like they were in the early 60s. And on the later Fenders, they began to use a different phase inverter, and they changed the way the input of the phase inverter works. So they went from having a 1,000 picofarad, 1 nanofarad input cap with a 1 meg grid leak per in the phase inverter to a 10 nanofarad input cap and a 330K grid leak. And so those models which have the 10 nanofarad input cap and the 330K have a lot more low end coming into the phase inverters. So if you want to have, say, a 76 sound more like a 66, You can keep the 330K, that's fine. Change the 10 nanofarad to 3 or 3.3 nanofarad, and all of a sudden it'll have the same bass response as the older 60s amps. That's the kind of thing I do. I don't try to make a Fender not be a Fender. But yeah, you can change everything at a Fender if you know what you're doing. I just happen to like the way they sound when they're stock. Hey, Polobo, how would I use a TLO82 as a phase inverter and a tube amp? I mean, the op amp? I wouldn't use an op amp for that. There are so many ways to do that now with high voltage MOSFETs, but you can do it with an op amp. That's inverting op amps is really simple, but beyond the scope of this chat, because I'd have to have diagrams and draw things up for you. But if I were to use an op amp, I wouldn't use a TL82. I'd use something that had much higher headroom, and I would make sure it had a hell of a, plus minus 15 or plus minus 30 preferable, so that could never be a weak link in the chain. That can never be a bottleneck. So there are ways to do it, but there are better ways to do a phase inverter, in my opinion, than an op amp these days. Origin 20 with head first mod or SV20 with attenuator? No me tlap. Neither. Both are very bad amps. Origin 20 is horrible. The SV20 is just not very good for its price. I don't know what your price range is, but man, there's so many better amps than those. I wouldn't suggest any of those, unless someone's really awful, in which case they should buy them. I'm not saying that you are. Hopefully you're not. I shouldn't have even said that because it's so easy to misconstrue what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I would wish them on my worst enemy, but I would not wish them on you. Yeah, I feel sorry for them. They must be fun at party. I have no suggested mods for a PV prowler. I've never had a prowler come in. Sorry. Doesn't Mojotone make Mesa cabs? I don't think so. I think Mesa had their own cabinet production, and I assume that Gibson bought that too. Hey, Green Balls Effects, thanks very much. Looking at a Xerec Junior gut shots, you notice that the cathode bias resistor and bypass caps are grounded to chassis. Would this cause any ground loop issues? I'd have to see what they did and what else, where on the chassis. I can't tell you that they did anything right or wrong without seeing it myself, and I don't have the context for that. I imagine, given that Dr. Z tends to do good stuff, he figured that's the easiest way to construct it, but it's odd that would be to chassis rather than on a board tied to other things and then to chassis. But it could be absolutely fine. I looked at one Benson. Is my audio getting distorted? Just 1 second. Distortion. Huh. How's this? How's that? Sounded good? All right, so I waited like 2 months and I updated the Mac to OS 26. I've been running it on my iPhone and phone for a while, my phone and my iPad for a while, and I waited for the first revisions. And something in one of my plugins isn't liking it, I'm gonna have to rebuild the cache after this. But all right. So let me know if that happens again. I can do that and hear it, but I don't want to have that echo with you guys. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, I had a Benson in it. It was really great build, beautiful amp. I don't remember anything beyond that. Very expensive, very worth it. If you can swing it and you like the sound, it's a good amp, very good amp. Hey, Bill in St. Louis. Yeah, Mojotone's got a cap, but I've not tried it, and I don't know who's making it for them. So we'll see. I still don't like using multi-section can caps in Princeton's because radials are so much better. Hey, Semper Fortis. I would say avoid the Delta Kings. They're really built amazingly poorly with no consideration to the owner as far as safety or longevity. They have a crappy disrespect for their client, for their customers, and I don't think we should reward that. Hey, Tor. There's not a single one, and it can get really deep. If you want to get into the audio handbook, version 4 that's out there, I'll pop this up on the screen again. Go here. And Merlin's site is excellent, and he sells books, and he's got some really good free articles up, and he's a great first resource, especially if you're if you're studying electronics, it'll make sense to you. But there's more to it than just getting to play them when they're working. You got to be able to diagnose. That's a skill that's really hard to teach, because it could be so many things when you first start out. Then after you do it for a while, you're like, oh, it's one of these three things. It's got to be one of these three things. And here's the one that usually is. So that's the part that's hard to teach. I have no thoughts on getting the most out of a GU12. Sorry, I have not played around with that model. 12DW is basically one side is a 12AX, one side is 12AT. You can, but there are plenty of DW7s out there. I think JJ still makes one. I'm not sure what your question is, Bill. Yeah, and like Brad says, I think the Mojotone is also physically large, like the JJ. Doesn't fit in a vintage Princeton. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the clues that told me that chassis for the Headstrong is most likely the Mojotone chassis, because it has the opening for the larger JJ. One of the things that's very odd about that Headstrong that I didn't mention in the videos, because I felt like I was just going to be kicking them at that point, was that the chassis had holes in the top where the screws were supposed to go, and then it originally had PEM nuts to receive machine screws at the bottom, but they had drilled out the bottom places so that they could pass a screw through and use a Kep's nut like on an old one. But the trouble is the holes in the cabinet, and this is the vote against it all being Mojotone as far as the supplies go, is that the holes, this was the line that the screw would make through the top of the chassis down to that hole. This hole in the cabinet was here, and so the screws were at an angle, and it was really hard to get that back into place. Also, the top underside of the cabinet had no shielding. I have some Weldwood spray adhesive, and I have heavy duty aluminum foil, so it is shielded now. But yeah, that Headstrong is not shielded, and weird angles on the screws, which seems like just drill the screw where it should be in the cabinet, and it'll line up to the chassis. Or if your chassis has the hole's in the wrong place. Move where the holes are in the chassis if you're making it. And it seemed odd to me. Let's see. Hey, Brett, got a AC15C1 with a greenback. Would be interested in playing some close alternatives. What would I recommend? I'm not sure that there is anything else on the market at the price range that is a close alternative. Maybe a used little sister or what's it called? Runt 20 from Friedman would be a similar kind of thing, more in the Marshall vein than the Vox vein. But as far as doing what the AC15C1 does in its price range, there is nothing else on the market, and it is such a good amp. You know, check out my Tone Hang with Steve video. That's my 335 straight into his. Now I did some mods to it, but the mods are when he hit switches and stuff. You know, he could have done it with a stock amp and gotten very comparable sounds in a lot of ways. Just some of the sounds that would not have been available to him. But the AC15 Custom, once you change out the tubes, because it comes with shit tubes, it's a fantastic amp. On that positive note, we're going to take our first 7-minute intermission. For those of you who might be new to the stream, at the top of each hour, I do a 7-minute intermission. Everyone can get a sandwich, get a cup of coffee, whatever you need to do. And that way you won't miss anything. You can all kind of schedule, okay, I'm going to go get a sandwich, or I'm going to go take a leak, whatever you need to do. See you guys back in 7 minutes. People often say I sound like Uncle Doug. Some people have accused me of trying to be. Some people have accused me of trying to be Uncle Doug. Some people have accused me of being Uncle Doug. And I would say, slightly tongue-in-cheek with much love to Uncle Doug, that here's how you can tell the difference. I have and use tuners. I've often thought about sending him one out of the blue. I love his videos, but man, it is hard to take out a tuned guitar. You'd think Rusty would let him know. Let's see where. How's it going? Forgot how to play that Tom Petty thing. Here comes my girl. I'm going to get back to the questions in order in just a minute. Man, aside from being Rusty, no offense to Mr. Rusty, who's been gone for many years. I did not know that. That's sad. Same amp settings with the Strat, the Tele, and the P90s, and 3 different levels of gain and response. Just going from the neck to the bridge on that Tele. That's all a good player needs. Man, what a nice amp. The reverb you're hearing on that is a plug-in. It's Abbey Road plate plug-in. So just a little touch of that nice stuff, because people aren't used to hearing a dry guitar on the internet. Let's see here. The thing I wanted to jump in here, Sean Eric Brooks says he loves Friedman, and Tone King and Friedman are made by the same company. Friedman and Tone King are both made by BAD, who often also make Morgan, and they also make that Wampler. Or made that Wampler. And the Wampler is really good, and the Friedman's really good. Tone King has got some serious problems, and the Morgans have got some serious problems, because BAD just cranks out the design they're given. And not all BAD is built the same. I would recommend the Friedmans. I would recommend the Wampler. I cannot recommend the Morgans and the Tone King. While they tried to fix it and stand behind the product, man, they should have caught those major issues with their boards before they sent it out into the world. And it's still got some weird issues. It's not at all the same company that Mark used to make. Anyway, let's get back to the questions in sequence. All right, this is like the 5th time someone's asked about the Origin 20 versus the SV20. Please. Only ask any one question once, because it makes me think that I've scrolled to the wrong place in the chat. It's really hard to I make it look so easy that you don't know that it's actually difficult to do what I'm doing. Please make it easier for me and only ask a question once. You can ask multiple questions, but any one question, just the once, please. What do I think about Mercury Magnetics transformers? Are they overpriced or worth the premium? Well, there's a very different pricing scheme if you're a professional like I am. I get them at dealer pricing, in which case they're usually within 20 to 30 bucks of a Haybor. They were within 20, 30 bucks of a classic tone, and they're usually within 30, 40 bucks of a Hammond. So some guys would sell them to the, some amp techs who had that would sell them at the full price to the musician and make an extra 150, 200 bucks. I would sell them at my price. So I always found them very cost effective, not always necessary. But the thing about Mercury, which is really good that people forget, is that say you want an output transformer for a 50-watt Marshall. Which one? The one from 1966, the one from 1967, the one that they used for 3 weeks in 1968, the one in 1969? Because Marshall was using different transformers from different manufacturers, and the specs changed. Whereas a lot of companies, like, no disrespect to Hammond and Habor, make great things. If you have a Marshall 50 watt, they sell one output transformer. That's their Marshall output transformer. And it usually sounds good, but Mercury has reverse engineered specific models for specific years. Like if you wanted to try the radio spares transformer in your AC30, that's the only game in town other than hunting down the original one from 1962. So for certain aspects, they're great. Now, back when Patrick was alive, and I could call him, I could get anything I wanted, I used a lot more Mercury. Since Patrick passed, I really miss the guy. And since the COVID, I've used them less. But the day will come when I will need to use them again because they will be the only game in town for that specific thing. Unless you go, yes, if I were going to go to Pacific or Habor and say, hey, I want you to make me this specific thing, they'll wind anything you want if you're willing to pay for it, and you need to get at least 500 versions of it, So it's nice that Mojotone has a pretty big catalog of stuff. Good place to put an HD fuse in between where the output of the tube rectifier and output transformer center tap meet, and then connect to the first filter cap. Make sure that you connect that filter cap to that node. Connect the filter cap directly to the rectifier. And then after that point, you can have an HT fuse that goes to the output transformer center tap and the choke. You never want to interrupt the connection between the rectifier tube and that first filter stage. That's very important. Otherwise, you're going to have way too much current being pulled through that fuse if you stand by, which most amps have. And you don't need to worry about standby, or if you're building a Princeton, you don't need to worry about standby. You don't need to worry about an HT fuse. You can add an HT fuse, though. And Life Serum, another example. Please only ask any one question at once. I'm not throwing you under the bus, Life Serum, I understand. And it does help me if people put question marks before their questions. It pops out of the chat more. It makes it easier for me to see them. If you want the Fender sound, just get a vintage Fender. If you want the Fender thing, I've got a 64 vintage deluxe reverb that is perfection. Yeah, if you can afford to, that's absolutely the case. What a lot of people of my generation and older forget is that the amps that we used to be able to get for $500, $600, $800 now start at $2,500, and they're out of reach for a lot of players because the market has just gone how the market has gone. Now, flip side of that is over the next 20 years, a lot of those amps will be available for sale again, and maybe the price will change as those who grew up wanting to be The Who or wanting to be, Zeppelin are no longer getting all the gear together, and someone's going to say, well, I found this funky old thing called a Princeton, and it is this really cool sound that I'm gonna use when I record it on my phone. So music changes all the time. I'm fine with music changing as long as it's still being made by people. But that's a very different subject. Avoid the Tone King unless you can afford one of the very old Tone Kings that was actually made by Mark. I cannot recommend the BAD versions of the Tone Kings. Svo Velkus, hello. After a recent repair of my Fender Deluxe Reverb, I noticed that not all soot carbon buildup was cleaned off. Could this be a safety issue if left as is? Well, if you had something go south and burned, you may have some soot or charring marks on the metal of the chassis, in which case that's fine because you have conductive layer on your conductive layer. The issue is make sure that if there's any charring or carbon left on a tube socket, that's when you can have a big problem. And then the new tube will also burn up. So make sure, even if you have ceramic sockets, if you had a massive short in your amp and there was something that actually burned, you could have a path in the socket. When an amp comes in that's had that kind of burn, I change out the output sockets just automatically. I want to make sure that what happened to you cannot happen again. But if you have some darkening around, on the metal, especially on an old steel chassis or something like that, don't worry about it. The steel is already conductive. It won't matter if you have a conductive layer there. But if you want to, you can go in there with a solvent and make sure it doesn't get into the wires or the tube sockets and see if you can get some more of it off. Fender 65 twin reverb is constant crackling static even without a guitar plugged in. Thoughts? Hey, Sean from Austin. That could be a lot of things. You could have loose hardware. I've got a video. It's in my Fender reissues playlist showing what a lot of owners can do, preventative maintenance that owners can do, including how to tighten things. It could be a bad, and is likely to be a bad tube. It could be solder joints. That amp is prone to getting bad solder joints where the pots connect to the PCB and where the input jacks connect to their little PCB. And any one of those can break, and it's an easy repair. It's also possible that you've got noisy resistors because some of the Fender plate and 220K, 82K, and 100K plate resistors that are often used for plates, some of them have not lasted as well as others depending on the year of the reissue. It more affects the Hot Rod and Blues series than the reissue series, but it can happen. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. Hardware tightening and some new tubes would probably take care of that. But it's easy to inspect it for a solder joint on where the pots connect to their boards and the jacks connect to their boards, because the solder joints are visible once you pull the chassis from the cab, and you can access them without taking everything apart. Hey, Wildcat, I've got videos in my reissues, Fender reissues playlist on mods for Princeton's showing what to do, or what I do at least, which makes them much more reliable and less prone to damage down the line, locks in a good sound, and makes them a much more reliable amp. But in a nutshell, the difference in construction between a 72 Marshall, which is 73 Marshall, which is revered as one of the best amps you can get, and a Fender reissue, the board quality is about the same. The traces are actually better, and the traces and pads are actually better on the Fender, but not by a lot. The overall idea of how to build the board is the same. The crucial difference is the old Marshalls kept the stuff that gets hot off the PCB, mounted on the octal sockets, and the Fender kept some hot stuff like the screen grid resistors and some heater connections on the board. So one of the things I show in that video is moving the hot stuff off the board to the octal sockets, and then it's every bit as reliable as a very expensive early 70s Marshall. That one little thing they forgot. Hey, Bill. Yeah, sorry. I must have missed an email. I was expecting a text from you, and I never got a text. All I need is a time when I know that you're going to be by your amp, and I'll FaceTime you and go through that thing together, see if it'll work for you. And that is not something I can offer to everyone. That's not something I can offer to everyone. I'm sorry. But Bill has done gross sexual favors for me, so he gets special treatment. Hey, Daria, I got an inconsistent acoustic rattle of my 68 Pro reverb reissue, considering mine probably has that same issue of its line, which I take note before taking it to a tech. Well, the first thing you need to do is make sure, if you're comfortable taking the chassis out of the amp, make sure that the baffle is tight. Make sure that every screw holding the baffle to the cabinet is tight. You'll want a pretty long number 2 Phillips to do that because you got to go at a kind of an angle. You want to make sure that the screws holding the speaker are tight. Not as tight as you physically can get them, but tight enough that you can't turn them with more than just 3 fingers on a screwdriver won't turn them anymore. Then put the chassis back in place and make sure that all 4 screws holding the chassis straps are really tight. You can get those as tight as you can do it by hand, and that the 2 screws holding the handle in place are tight. Beyond that, you could have a noisy tube, but I would check that first because that's the most common stuff. And also, while you're at it, if you have a 1/2-inch socket, make sure the input jacks are tight. Make sure the speaker jacks are tight because they're not always tight from the factory, and it makes a big difference. If you have a number 2 screwdriver, you can make sure the transformers are tight while you're at it. Do instrument cables make a big difference like Mogami and Analysis Plus, or is it mostly hype? Hey, Tebe 3240. Most of it's hype. If you get Mogami or Belton or other, can't think of another good company right now. Mogami, Belton, some others that I use all the time. I can't think of their names right now. Those are really good high quality cables that are not promising to paint your house or get you laid. They're not over-promising. They're not made of Canary. Canary is another good one. Thank you. Thank you very much, Wes. Yeah, I like the Canary G4 for pedals and inside amps, for instance. There's a high-quality thing you get with a Canary or a Belton or a Mogami. Beyond that, when you get into evidence and all that stuff, it's hogwash, designed to separate you from your money. I use... because I can't remember numbers. Mogami 2524 cable. Neutrik, this is a silent plug, so when it's unplugged, there's none of that. And so when I switch in guitars, because I switch guitars a lot, there's no pop. At the other end of that, I use a straight Mogami cable. You can also use Switchcraft. I don't like Switchcraft as well because Switchcraft tends to come loose over time and just unthreads. You have to always be checking all that out. Nothing wrong with the quality of Switchcraft. I just find that their connections come loose and you got to retighten them. Whereas the Neutrik and the Amphenol really stays locked in. Kev the Windsurfer, new subscriber, and here's the live chat. Well, welcome, Kev. Make yourself at home. Enjoy it. Whirlwind, avoid. Whirlwind, molded. Always avoid molded cables, molded plugs, because the plugs, when they fail, you got to snip them off and put a different plug on anyway. And the wire that Whirlwind uses inside sometimes doesn't take solder very well. So there's a lot of bullshit out there. But, I would say that I also roll my own because it's a lot cheaper. I can make a cable for $25-30 that would cost you $60 to buy pre-made from Mogami. But you get what you pay for. If you want to use, is it Hosa? The cheap stuff. It's fine. It's not the trouble. Hosa cables sound fine, but the jacket's not very rugged, and they have a lot of memory. The plastic has a lot of memory, so it's real easy for it to get snarled and get all tangled up because it wants to coil up on itself. Whereas the Mogami insulator doesn't have a lot of memory, so I can do loops, and it loops beautifully to put away, and then I'll lay it out flat, and it just straightens itself out and doesn't twist up on itself. So you get what you pay for up to a certain point. So if you have Amphenol, Neutrik, Switchcraft, or was it GH plugs, and you have Mogami or Canary or Belton cable, you're as good as it gets. The rest of it is practice. Any experience thoughts on the Cirabella? It's a very good amp. I don't care for the It would not suit my needs because it is very, very, very clean and kind of an open canvas for pedals. But for a lot of people, they love it. It's a very well-made amp. Thoughts on the Marshall JTM45? Are greenbacks the best for it? Greenbacks are one good option. So are, I'd say, some 30-watt Weber Silver Dogs would also be a great option for that. And you can also put in some creambacks. You can go to town. There are a lot of good, a lot of good sounding speakers for that. It would actually be very interesting to hear one of those with a pair of the Alessandro SC64s that Eminence makes. But when it comes to speakers, I can tell you what's worked for me. I can tell you what's worked for my clients. I can't tell you what you'll like. I can tell you what's not a safe speaker to use as far as impedance or wattage, but within the realm of what's well-made and what's a suitable choice for your amp, there's so much subjective stuff. It's hard for a guy talking to you from a little box to know what you're going to like. I'm not the world's biggest greenback fan, but many people are. Is there any advantage of an 8-inch speaker over a 10-inch speaker in a Champ clone? I'm thinking of swapping mine out. Well, the advantage of a 10-inch is that you have a little bit more everything. The disadvantage of a 10-inch is it can be hard to fit in some Champs, but no 8-inch speaker, any 8-inch speaker ever made has been as good as the most average to not very good 10-inch speaker. A 10-inch speaker sounds better. Now, if you're coming to this from car audio or something where an 8-inch driver is very common, that's a very different thing. It's a very different thing. It's a very different efficiencies. You cannot correlate guitar speakers to car audio speakers, etc. But 8-inch speakers in an amp can be a character thing, but they never sound very good. A 10-inch is the beginning point of achieving great sound, and unless you just really want something very, very nasal and very punchy and focused and only a very small frequency range. Remember, those little 8-inch speakers were not designed really for guitar. They're for PA things. They were, well, Mr. Johnson, please report to the PA, to the gym for blah, 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 blah. That's what those things were designed for. And so they stuck them in the doors of Chevys, and they stuck them in Fender Champs and all kinds of stuff. There's no romance to it. Wildcats 7940. Did you ask this before, or is this the second person asking this? Go to my Fender reissue playlist, and I show all that. What are my opinion on Schumacher transformers? Didn't Fender use them during the blackface years? Yes, Schumacher used them from like 61 or 62. Fender used them from 61 or 62 through at least the early 80s, and they're great. My OR30 with blowing HC fuses powered to standby with no tubes and fuses were fine. Is there a way to determine which tube is lost? I tested screen resistors, but only 95% sure I found cathode resistor. Does that take 4 EL84s? Well, you can look and see if any of them are really discolored, but other than that, without a tube tester, or, if you have a light bulb limiter like I've shown, you can put in 2 tubes at a time, one on each side of that. Say if there are 2 sockets here and 2 sockets here, put in these 2 tubes and then put in these 2 tubes and narrow it down to see which one or more of those tubes are bad. It may not be that the tubes are bad. You may have a burned screen grid resistor inside, but without having your amp, without seeing pictures of your amp, I can't tell you what specifically to do. But you can, if you have a current limiter or a light bulb limiter, so you're not going to be feeding fuses into the machine constantly, you can use your existing amp as a tube tester, but you don't want to do any damage. Do I think modern reverb tremolo pedals like the Strymon Flint have got just as good as reverb and tremolo on tube amps? No. The tremolo in the Strymon Flint is really amazing, and the harmonic trem and the bias trem are very, very close, but the reverb's not there. And the reverb's not there on anything digital I've tried. I've got a client sent me this Catalan bred Topanga Canyon pedal to try for reverb. And it was really bright. Didn't sound like a tube. It didn't sound like a tank reverb, a spring reverb, and like the Flint, like that, like so many digital pedals today. As soon as I engaged it, it went. So as soon as the pedal makes that sound, I don't use that pedal. I like the fact that right now, with the volume off on that telly into that 50 watt Germino over that 40 something watt Germino, I can hear that it's on, but it's way in the background. If I had that reverb pedal in line right now, I'd be hearing. I don't like noise, and I don't understand why so many people have really high noise floors in their digital products these days, or why so many players are fine with that, and why so few reviewers ever mention the fact that, oh, by the way, this thing sounds like you got bacon in the background. It's not really bacon. It's more like a steady sleet in the background. Mistakenly put a 12 AT7 in V1 of an old AC36 and really liked what it did to the sound. Is harmful to it. Won't hurt it. You're just going to have a very different efficiency and a lot less gain. V1, I believe, is the input tube for the. I have to look at the book. Try to remember which tube V1 is in an AC36. Let's see. If you mean V1 as it's denoted in the schematic, or V1 as it's physically located in the amp, in which case, yes, it would be. Are you talking about V7 or V1? V7 is the first tube on the outside. That's in the tremolo section. V1 is second or third from the right, looking in the amp, but first on the schematic. Anyway, you'll just have a lot less gain. It'll behave very differently, but it won't hurt anything. Either way. Might be good in V7, but might be too weak to drive the tremolo. Won't hurt the amp, won't hurt the tube. Building an AC15 clone. I've seen recommendations of 100 ohm to 150 ohms for the cathode resistor. Do I have a preference? For the cathode resistor on the output tubes, yeah, you're going to want 120 to 150, maybe 180 ohms. Typically, it's going to depend on your wall voltage, the B plus in the amp. But if I were building an AC15, I would have 120, 150, 180 on hand. It's going to be one of those is going to be the way to go. But I don't have a preference as far as what the numbers on the resistors say. I have a preference for where the amp is going to idle, and I want that amp at idle to be drawing between 12 and 14 watts per tube. So one of those resistors will get you that, and that would be the one that works in your amp if you know that you have X wall voltage, and that is the ideal wall voltage that you'll use with that amp, and you'll try to use with that amp. That's in its most ideal state. With 120 ohm resistor, it's pulling 13.5 watts. At 120 volts coming out of the wall, 240 volts coming out of the wall, whatever you have. And that's going to depend on a whole bunch of factors. So that's why if I were building one, I'd have a whole bunch of resistors to try. How do I feel about the 59 reissue basement series? Similar build quality to the 65 series. They're not built as well, but they're built fairly well. I've got a reissue basement up on the channel from within the last year. Some truly stupid things in that amp that they did that I show how to undo. Some truly good stuff in that amp. And at the end of that series, you get to hear it next to a restored 58. And the 59 reissue holds up pretty well after the changes. But some of those things that they did in that were just stupid. What do I think of the Mesa 50 caliber EL84 version with lead master and EQ? FX loop seems pretty hot. It's garbage. They're garbage amps. What's the best place to get inexpensive tubes? The Tube Store, Tube Depot, Euro Tubes, Magic Tubes. If those cost too much, then save up, because that's, if you can't afford a set of JJs or Sovtech WXAs, you're in the wrong game. I mean, I'm just being honest. There are things in this life that you pay for, and if someone offers you a free lunch, it ain't. Anything of quality is going to cost a little bit, and it's considering, it used to be you can get a JJ for $10. Now it's closer to 20. But a JJ12 ECC 83 for $20 or so is a good tube. That's as inexpensive as you want to go. You're going to lose a lot more money trying to buy used stuff or bargain things listed on eBay or a Reverb or something. Hey, Jeff McErlane. I'm glad I stopped playing before you showed up. You always make me feel bad about that. But if you go check the beginning of the stream, Jeff, I am featuring a Germino today, which you would really like. I wish I could teleport you here, because if I could pop Jeff down here and hand him any of these guitars, I guess I'd probably get my SG, just because it'd be fun to watch him play an SG, into this Germino and turn it up. Then it would sound even mo better. It's amazing how good the amp sounds when a real player is there. So you guys have to make do with me. Would I have any interest in finding some better 16mm pots for my Orange Rocker 30? I wonder if they mount upside down. You could, Dan, but then it wouldn't be anything supporting the board. Don't worry about the pot quality. The pot qualities are fine in the Orange. The only issue with pots in the Orange is they have really long shafts. They're made of pot metal, so they'll shear off if you hit the knobs, so don't hit the knobs. And for some strange reason, they have set screw knobs on split shaft pots, and that can also be problematic. So I don't know why they do it that way, but they're fine in stock form. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Now I'm at the part where everyone was telling me that I'm having audio issues. Apparently I should have done some death metal. Hopefully I am able to, after I rebuild the cache, that won't happen again. Sorry. Always fun doing updates. I tested this thing for 2 days after doing those updates, and I got a couple little crispy moments that went away, and I thought, oh, that's a buffer thing. Rebooted, didn't happen again, and then go live in front of the world and start sounding like Mr. Roboto or whatever. Yeah, I don't like being forced to have a background scheme. Though you can get away with it in some cases, but I don't like to. Sir Ombre Combo, still like it? Haven't heard anything regarding reliability issues. You shouldn't hear anything related to reliability issues. It's a really reliable, excellently built amp. If the Brown Deluxe works for you, it does that thing really well. Speaking of which, for those 3 of you who didn't see it, and since Jeff's here, check out Keith Williams' video on the Brown Deluxe. I think Jeff had some stuff on there, channeling some Reverend G, and Zach Childs had a video on the Brown Deluxe this week as well, and that's pretty much what the Sir Ombre is. A few little voicing changes and different speaker, and a much less expensive amp these days, but it'll do the thing. You can do Brown Sugar with that thing. The ZZ Brown Sugar, not the Stones Brown Sugar. I guess you can do the Stones Brown Sugar too, come to think of it. Have no tips for a Red Stripe Bandit. Sorry, Wiggum. I have not seen the new Andy Fuchs Bonamassa amp, but good on Andy for getting that connection. Andy's a good guy. I hope Bonamassa stays with it long enough, because a lot of those guys, Bonamassa is not as bad about it as John Mayer, where they'll have the John Mayer signature this and the signature that and the signature this other thing. And then he switches companies 6 months later. And, so I don't like watching that part of the endorsement game out there. Apparently I got a shout out in Jeff's live cast. Does he get amp advice from me? We share war stories. we share war stories. I don't know that I give him any advice. If anyone's given advice, he's given it to me. It doesn't reflect my playing, but you know, I learned an awful lot from that guy. Kids with participation awards. Yeah, I don't really get that down about it. I feel sorry for them, having to go through life with that brain. But you know, Coldacre says the Woody Pro Junior 60th anniversary is really similar to the AC-15C1 EL84. Costs a little more though. No, I hate to shoot down anything that you say, but no, it's not similar at all. The Pro Junior is a fucking piece of shit. If you got a ton of money and you don't mind having a disposable amp, sure, they're shits and giggles. You can keep one in the spare bedroom if you ever want to play late at night. But it's not a serious amp. It's not built at all to the level. My God, especially since it costs more than AC-15C1, which is an infinitely better amp. And just because it's EL84s doesn't mean that they know what they're doing with them. Fender has never used EL84s properly. Vox has done it consistently for 60 years. No, the Woody. Any Pro Junior is garbage. I'm sorry, it's just garbage. This part, though, we're entirely in agreement on. If you can't make an AC-15C1 sound good, it's not the amp's fault. That is true. Man, Douglas, I can't tell you that. I don't know. It took me a really long time, and I like to think that I have above average mechanical skills and average dexterity. It's not really about the mechanical skills and the dexterity, though. It's being able to see systems. You know, I came to this. I used to do IT work and knowing how computer networks work and databases work. It's the same kind of thing. You got to keep 37 plates spinning at the same time and know what's going on and see how they all connect to each other. And then you need to know how to use a screwdriver. Then you need to know righty-tighty. You know, you don't need to run stereo amps all the time, like Bretrick here says. You know, if you love the sound of your amp, but you need it louder, you don't necessarily need a second amp. Remember, the world has extension speakers in it. And when you double the amount of surface area that's moving air by going from a 1x12 to a 2x12, you are increasing the perceived volume by as much as doubling the wattage, something roughly in that area. I don't want to get called out on the rough specifics there, but you know, if you have a 1x12 combo and you have a 2x12 and you can use both of them for large gigs, that 1x12 connected to a 2x12 is going to be as loud as going to a much louder amp, and it takes up less space, it costs less. You can do all kinds of stuff. I have not tried the Mojo NC3015. It's only 15 watts, but I'd have to look at the build to see what they got wrong, because everyone gets something wrong with Voxes. Vox gets something wrong with every Vox. They don't have a single model where everything is just right. Why not a review of the Fender 57 Custom Champ? Well, Victor, is it Victoria? Okay, Victor. Sorry, it's all running together on my screen. I was making sure I wasn't calling you Victoria, unless that was what you typed. I'm not one of those channels that gets things in for review. Like, hey, this company sent me this, and I don't get to keep it, and I'm not getting paid, and they don't have any say what they don't have any say in what I'm going to tell you. But let me tell you about this product promotion. I'm not one of those channels. I don't get stuff sent to me for review. Occasionally, things like this Germino will come in that I will feature. The Germino came in because the owner wanted to be sure that he had a good amp. The Bravado, what's his name? Pedals maker, Brian Wampler. The Wampler came in because the owner wanted to know if it was a good amp. They're great amps. I could have said, this is great. Here you go. I put it on the channel because I figured people like to see some sunshine and light at some point. But amps that come into me usually have an issue. And I worked on 157 Custom Champ a long time ago. It's on the old Facebook version of this that I haven't updated in years. I'm trying to stay off that awful app now. But the 57 Custom Champ is a terrible amp, and the best review I can give someone is sell it while it's still working and get something good, because it has too many problems in it. Not as bad as the Eric Clapton Vibrolux that they had out, or Tremolux that they had out. That thing was really flawed. Very expensive and really flawed. '71 Basement 50 watt through a 2x10 cab with a Celestian greenbacks is snarly AF with overdrive. Yes, it will be. I cannot recommend, hey Johan, I can't recommend Tone King unless you can afford the old ones that Mark Bartel is making. I've just seen too many issues from the current BAD versions. I love to burn my bridges in public. We can light our way through the bridges with the bridges I burned. What tube brands do I consider to be good now? It depends on the tube type and the application. JJs are great for most people for preamp tubes. Their 6V6S tubes become microphonic and combo amps. For 6L6s, I like the Tungsol SDRs, the 6L6 GC WSDRs. For 7025 applications, I like the Electro-Harmonix 7025s. But for V2 and a Marshall or V2 and a Vox, those Russian-made tubes can't handle the cathode follower. I'll put a JJ in there, or I'll sort out maybe an older Brimar, depending on the customer's budget. So it's not just one brand that I like. But JJ's had a period in the last 5 years where a lot of the glass was really thin and they were losing vacuum for no apparent reason other than the day ended in Y. It seems that they have fixed that, and I hope so, because they have always been a very good, inexpensive option. But there was a period where you get a new JJ and it put in the amp and it sounded fine, and you turn around to get your coffee and come back and it'd be frosted white. So hopefully that is all in the past. The good news is if you buy from a good vendor who sells tubes, and that's what they do, like the Tube Store, Tube Depot, Euro Tubes, they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, we'll send you a replacement. Whereas if you buy from Sweetwater, or any other big box store, they'll send you a replacement, but the replacement might do the same damn thing. And there are some other places used to do business with that would want you to provide proof that you didn't drop it, et cetera, et cetera. It's nice when they're just like, yep, we stand behind our product. You had 30 days? Any problem? Here we go. Change them out. Yeah, nothing's inexpensive these days, Wes. JJs are imported from Slovenia. Let's not get into the tariff thing, but everything's going up crazy. And the coffee that I bought 3 weeks ago for $9 is back up at $16, and it's still one of the cheapest ones on the market. Yeah, man, I hate hearing an out-of-tune guitar. No, I can't promise my playing will always be in tune. Well, I hit a couple sour ones there earlier, but I always tune the guitars up. Have I ever heard of a DV Mark amp? Good guitars. Isn't that the little bass things, the little solid-state bass amps? Is that what you're talking about? You got a Pine Esquire with the Jimino Lead 35 with the broadcaster pickup in it. Yeah, that's gonna sound good, man. I'm glad you're happy. Should I use a 420 milliamp rated power transformer for a 100 watt build, or a 290 milliamp rated transformer? Well, Super Sean, I don't know, because that's the kind of stuff I have spreadsheets for, because I suck at math and I don't remember the things that I'm bad at. I remember where I keep the spreadsheets that I've already done to do that. Brad probably knows off the top of his head. A couple of the other guys on the channel know off the top of their heads. But that's the kind of thing I always have to look up, so I'm not going to give you any advice on that. I would say that usually the data sheet will tell you. Is it possible to use two sets of differently matched power tubes in a 4-power tube amp by running one on each on either side, one on each on either side? I've heard mentioned this. Yeah, you don't want them to be too far off, but say you've got a, the boxes have that rating number like 19 or 33 or whatever. Say you've got an amp that, like a twin reverb, takes 4 6L6s. You've got one pair of 6L6s, and each tube says 29, and another pair says 22. Well, on one side, you put a 29 and a 22. On the other side, you put a 29 and a 22, and you're still going to have 51 per side. That's total current draw. But if you had 29 and 29 and 22 and 22, then you have 44 versus 58, or and then not good at all. So you need to make sure that each side is getting drawing roughly the same. If it's too an extreme a gap between the tubes, you could still have some bias issues where one tube per side may be getting a little toasty, but usually you can do a slight mismatch just fine. You don't want to have your A pair be radically different current drawing than your B pair, because then your A pair may just take off, or you won't have any common mode cancellation. You'll hear a lot of noise in the output. Are there any amp brands or models that fell by the wayside I feel should have been better received by the amp buying public? That's an interesting question. Never thought about that. I can't think of any really off the top of my head. Usually the market's pretty good a force in these things. The stuff that people find useful tends to make it, and the stuff that people don't find useful or find gimmicky doesn't tend to make it. The trouble is when something new is on the market, it's hard to know which category it's going to land in. But I can't think of any gems that just coulda, shoulda. I think there's a reason that things work or don't. There used to be so many little fly-by-night amp companies in the early 60s. And there's a reason that Fender, by and large, cleaned them all up. Metropolis, you're right, you're right, Brad. George could have kept it. George's company has been shut down by the stuff that we're not supposed to talk about because we're not supposed to be political in these things. It's just too hard to operate a small business when one of the major powers in the world is hostile and actively wants to turn over the world economy. So Metropolis, fuck. Sorry, George. Do vintage capacitors have any influence on tone? Some guys swear new old stock musters make a difference in a Marshall circuit, but they are crazy expensive. Man, there's so many myths out there when it comes to this stuff. Vintage capacitors don't have any influence on tone. Different capacitor material has a small, sometimes crucial, sometimes not important at all effect on tone. If you have an amp that has polyesters and an amp that has polystyrenes, it's possible that you can hear a difference in some circuits. Some other circuits you won't hear any difference. If an amp comes in, if I had a 67 Marshall come in or another 65 AC30, I would offer to the owner that if you would like, I will sort out some original gold WEMA trophy foils for the Vox, or I can find some old Phillips mustard caps for the Marshall if they're willing to pay for it and it's important to them. Otherwise, I will happily use the WEMA 1813 MKTs in either amp because they're both all polyester caps, and you will have a very similar sound. And they're entirely reliable. Now, there are caps out there that are vintage that were absolutely shit, like the yellow and red Astrons in 50s and very early 60s Fenders. Crap. Do they have a mojo tone, special sound? Yeah, the way they leak DC and drift in value is magical. Similarly, the Hunts caps and very early brown WEMAs in some Voxes were absolutely shit. And people think, oh, it's a box cap, it's bad. Man, those little WEMA red polyester caps are fantastic. I think they call their formulation PET instead of polyester, but those things sound fantastic. You can get those in like a Sur. You get those in some early '90s crates. Phenomenal sounding capacitors, very small, very discreet. And today, the Panasonic ECQ series is a fantastic, tiny little polyester cap that can replace a huge orange drop. You know, there's a time and a place for everything. But you know, Jimi Hendrix did not sound like Jimi Hendrix because of the capacitors in his amp. And the amps that he was playing, that he was recording with, were brand new. And if you play a 1967 Marshall with its original caps today, it will not sound like it did in 1967. And that's the thing that's hard to get people to remember. Plus, you're not being recorded in the studios he was recording at with the engineers and producers. He's recording with the microphones, the mic trees, the compressors, the tape formula, the tape speed. You know, there's a lot more that goes into it, all of which count infinitely more than the capacitors in his amp, or whether he had carbon comps or carbon films in his amp, because he probably had a mixture of all those things. On that note, we're going to take our second intermission, and I'll see you guys in 7 minutes. Never touched anything on the amp. All those sounds, Strat, Telly. Man, if I would grab the SG or the 335, it'd be a monster. What a very nice amp. And I've got the master volume turned down. It's about as loud in the room as a deluxe reverb. So, you know, I approve. Hey, Greg Bobowski. That's that Germino Club 40. You can hear it at the beginning of each hour a little bit. Anyway, yeah. There are amps that come in that I don't want to see go. And I guess that's the highest compliment I could pay to an amp. First of all, I didn't have to do anything to it. Had nothing wrong with it. And second of all, I'm going to miss it. Hey, Imvo Bass. Welcome very, very much. Thank you for joining us from the UK. My dog just shaved and a haircut punched my door to get in 5 minutes ago. Awesome. All right, let's get back to the questions in sequence. Where were we here? I don't know what Uncle Doug did before doing what he does now. Why do vintage guitar amps fetch nowhere near vintage guitars? Is it because of safety issues? Well, vintage amps are expensive, man. But it's because I'd focus on the guitar more than the amp. And I think that most guitarists understand what makes a guitar unique or special, and they don't really understand the amps. That said, 2-3 years ago, I guess about 2.5 years ago, my wife and I were in Nashville to go see a concert, and we ducked into Carter Vintage for a little bit, and she saw all these Tweed amps lined up there at Carter Vintage, and she said, "Oh, it looks like our living room." And then she saw the price tag, $7,000, $10,000, $12,000. She's like, "Are these just like the ones in our living room?" I'm like, "Yeah." That's why none of those amps stayed with me. Some of those amps I could roll my own, and you know I could make an amp just like this Germino, but it'd be cheaper even for me just to buy the Germino because he's already spec'd out the cab and the cabinet and all that. Yeah, Patrick was a great guy. We call each other just to shoot the shit. He was always fun to talk to, and I was just shocked and devastated by his loss and how fast it was. Hey, Brett. Yeah, we're going to get back to that major. It's a lot to get into that Marshall major the way it's built, but yeah, I want to get that finished up. The owner of that dropped off 3 amps, and his deluxe and his concert are all ready, so I need to finish that major so he can pick all 3 amp ups, and I can get paid. So yeah, I've got a lot of factors telling me I need to finish that major. Thank you very much, Frobisher. Appreciate that. Yeah, sorry about the playing. I was like, hey, that sounds here. I'm like, oh, then I'm like, how does that song go? And then I still got it rusty. If I were to play that for 5 minutes and then go live with it, I'd be fine. But I'm always one warm up away from being able to play, and I never seem to find the time to do the warm up. The reverb that you're hearing with that Germino is the Abbey Road plate plug-in from Waves in Logic. So. Yeah, the 68 Pro reverb isn't really a reissue. Yeah, but it's in their 68 line. Ironically, it's the only amp in their 68 line, which is actually pretty damn good. Hey, Ricky Rodam. I have not tried an Amplified Nation Wonderland Overdrive. I've heard some things about their build quality that give me qualms, but that's anecdotal. I have no direct experience with them myself. So I cannot I don't want to speculate. I hope that they are fantastic, and I hope that you love it for decades and decades, but I've not tried one. Pete Cornish cables are unidirectional, apparently. No, they're not unidirectional as far as the cables. AC. It's passing AC. How do you have AC on a unidirectional anything? AC goes both ways at all times. What they do have is a telescoped shield, so it will be better ejecting noise in one orientation than the other. That's all it is. If you plug it in one way, it'll be quieter because of the way the shielding is connected. But cables are never directional because they're passing AC. Brad, if you want to get in here with like 8 paragraphs on how AC works, now would be the time. But trust me, if any instrument cable was directional, it would not work for guitar. Is there a simple way to test uninstalled capacitors for leakage? Is the capacitor tester sufficient if the reading is on spec? Is it okay? And check with the ohmmeter for a short. Well, check with your meter to make sure that you don't have a short. And most meters will also read capacitance. Make sure it's within tolerance. Beyond that, if you have a known voltage supply, say you're testing a 400 or 600 volt cap, dial there's a voltage supply up to 450 volts, or 350 to 400 volts for the 400 volt cap, and 500 volts, 550 volts for the 600 volt cap. Attach the cap to it, and then on the other side have a 1 meg resistor to ground, and then measure if you have any voltage at the junction of the cap and the cap and the resistor. If you have any DC present there, you've got a bad cap. But I don't usually test new capacitors, though I'll occasionally test the actual capacitance, or I'll test for shorts just in case I solder them in place, but I don't do voltage checks before putting them in place. I don't think I've ever had a new cap from a brand that I use be bad. I've had a couple times electrolytics, large value electrolytics, large high wattage high voltage electrolytics have a bad section. I can usually reveal that testing before I put it in circuit. But for coupling caps, I've just never had a leaky new one. And I'm repeating myself because you guys are repeating yourselves. I've been a couple of people have asking the questions again and again. Please only ask any one question at the one time. I've got little question marks for any question, please. I need to add another one on top. Only ask your one question at the one time, please. I just got to find a polite way to say, shut up, you're driving me nuts. I'm kidding, but it's hard when the same question pops up again and again, because the interface I use sometimes scrolls when I don't want it to. And when I see a question a second time, I thought, did I scroll? Where am I? And it takes me out of being able to answer people's questions. Not amps, but got recommendations for audio interfaces, like something in the $200 to $300 range, provide good quality, keeping the guitar sound true. Hey, Johan, I'm quite pleased with my Motu M2. There's also an M4. And there's some other ones on the market which are great, but some of them don't have features that I have found useful. So the next level up from this that I'd look at would be some of the UA stuff. But without spending the money for the really high-end UA Apollo stuff, I found that the Moto M2 sounds great. I've had a lot of great recordings with it, no problems. All right, Brad says, I've missed a question. I have an old Magnavox stereo amp, 2x84 base SE amps that share a power transformer. Would like to have some fun with this topology. What possibilities other than 2 clone channels might I consider? Sorry, I missed that question. I try not to miss them. You could do a stereo thing, but it's an old Magnavox stereo amp. If it's for home studio, I would just, man, I don't know if I would do anything with that. I don't like converting things to guitar amps that were never guitar amps because there's so many things you find that you end up having to do that you end up throwing tons and tons of money. Pulled from a turntable console, yeah, that's not going to have, none of the impedances in there are going to be conducive to doing anything for guitar with it. So, if it's working, sell it to someone who wants a little dual mono power amp for their turntables or something. But I wouldn't mess around with it for guitar stuff, especially not all those Filmo sound projectors people want to turn into a guitar amp. If you do it right, it would be much better and cheaper just to build a 5E3 Deluxe from a kit to begin with. Ooh, my faithful AC30CC2 with greenbacks got stolen. Should I go for another used custom classic, or is the AC custom better? Any non-Vox options that want to break the bank, so $2,000. Get a used AC30 custom, better than the custom classic. You'll love it much more. It does everything that you liked, but more. And used, you might be able to get the blues. Certainly under $2,000, you can get the blues. But if you're used to the greenbacks, there's nothing wrong with the greenbacks either. Lava cable's still around, Uncle Ike. Thank you, Zoidberg Fluffy Butt. All right, and not only did you give me a super chat, but you have the username of the week. Congratulations. Thank you very much. I just ordered a 65 Deluxe Reverb head, rebuilt with the Tube Amp Doctor AB763 board. And for my videos of the Quick Connects, thoughts on raw production boards and cab recommendations. Okay, so thoughts on repro boards. You have a board. You got a TAD board for it. That should be just fine. I assume I've not tried the TAD board, but the only thing I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't work. It's not a direct drop in, I don't think, but it can be made. Cab recommendations. GuitarCabsDirect.com is a really good option, and Mojitone is a really good option. Those are the places I would go to get a Deluxe Reverb cab made, whether for combo or standalone. Thanks, CJ. Appreciate that. Clean feedback is fun. I listened back to that. I don't think it came across on the stream as well as I'd hoped, but live audio is always tricky. Does such a speaker exist that would combine the warmth of a Jensen and the hi-fi-ness of a JBL K series? Feel that would be cool for the bigger Fender style circuits, maybe even Deluxe 22 watt. You're almost chasing two different things. The one thing I would suggest that you really might like, Eminence has made, I think they still make, a big, it's like 80 watt Alnico speaker called the Eric Johnson model. And that would do what you're talking about, I'm pretty sure. Or if not, you'd love it equally. That is an amazing sounding speaker for cleans. I don't think that Jensens are warm. I think Jensens are rolled off. I don't think that JBLs are hi-fi. I think the JBLs are too bright. But in terms of the full frequency response that a JBL can give, matched with a little bit of softness on the attack, those 80 watt Eminence Eric Johnsons might be the ticket for you, but they are very expensive because that's an awful lot of Alnico to be buying. It's kind of an odd tonal request. It's like I want it to be brown, but also yellow at the same time. How do modern AC30s emulate tube rectifying? Asking because my 77 AC30 is solid state rectified, and I'm wondering whether it's worth modifying. Well, it's on the custom series. What they do is they have a 180 ohm 5 watt resistor between each side of the HT secondary and the diodes, and it's just standard diode setup in that amp. And so they're limiting the current of the AC, not the DC. And they're spreading it out. So each secondary has a 5-watt resistor, so you have to use one 20-watt resistor. And not only does that resistor give you that current limiting that you would get from a tube rectifier, it also gives you the voltage drop that you would get from a GC34. And it's a very good solution. It takes away the heat. It's 2 added components. It's no problem to do, and I've not had that fail in any of the AC30 customs that have come in. So it's a good circuit. Tremolo tick on a 73 Super Reverb driving me mad. Try the cap across the roach, lead dress, tube rolling. Then you got DC in your board, and 73 maybe heavily waxed. You got to get all the wax out of that area, all of it, top and bottom. And you got to soak the board in isopropyl and then get that board really hot. And then your ticking will go away. Sorry, it's just part of it, of the joy of the wax boards starting in 73. Hey, Scott, a while back you saw me bridge a switch with a 10 meg resistor to stop it popping. Can I do that to fix an effects pedal that pops when I turn it on and off? Badstone. It depends on what they're doing in the circuit. I don't know whether the electroharmonics is using a flip-flop circuit, or whether the switch itself is just a momentary contact that flips some transistor logics, or whether they're doing a physical true bypass. I'd have to have the pedal or the schematic for the pedal to tell you whether they'd be effective. Resistors can have their downside in audio, as every time you add a resistor to ground in audio, it can roll off highs, and cumulatively it can be a problem. I can't tell you how to fix your electroharmonics. On the switch that I was depopping, I just gave since the cap was connected to voltage on one side, I put the 10 meg in there, so it always had a path to ground. So there's, it went from very high resistance to no resistance, as opposed from no resistance to complete, to complete resistance. If that makes sense, so air versus a connection versus an attenuated connection through the 10 meg. That was the bright switch on a Fender bright switch, where that switch was popping until I put the 10 meg across there. My AB165 basement has its bad output transformer replaced by a Tech in 1995. The replacement transformer says Fender. It's never really sounded right since. Well, I don't know whether they use the correct transformer. I'm sorry. There are a lot of in 1995, there are a lot of transformers that would have said said Fender, and some of them might technically work, but that doesn't mean that's correct. But without having your amp here in front of me, I can't tell you what they did or what the what specifically is wrong. But I would say take your amp to a really good tech and see what's in there, and they can find out. I watched Julian Lodge's rig rundown. He uses a Strymon Flint in front of the normal channel on a deluxe reverb. Well, good for him, but the Strymon Flint hisses, and that bothers me. What reverb tank do I recommend? Cali Gypsy. It depends on the amp, but for most Fenders that use a tube-driven reverb, I like the Mojo Tone Medium Decay, the 2AB-C1 thing. It's 4AC12B or whatever. It's the medium decay standard tank that works in a Fender. The modern medium decay tanks sound more like the old long decay Gibbs Accutronics. I said this in the first hour, but if you can't get the Mojo Tone, you can get the MOD version or the Tube Amp Doctor version or the Ruby Tanks version, the Ruby Tubes version. They're all the same tank pretty much. The Mojo Tone sounds the best for whatever reason, but that medium decay sounds great. Do I have any opinion on the best way to lower voltages in a vintage Fender Champ to stock levels? I've historically put 600 ohm resistor in place of the 478 cathode resistor on the 6V6. Yeah, I put a 600 or to 680 in there, and usually the heaters are fine. I just make sure that it doesn't, it's not biased too hot, and doing the same thing you're doing. I'll use a 3 watt and Make sure that that resistor, which can get hot, is not snugged up against the electrolytic next to it, and move on. Thank you, Casimir Kid. That's very kind of you. Appreciate that. Are the tubes on Sweetwater any good? There's no way of knowing. No one at Sweetwater knows. They don't have tube testers. They're just buying in bulk and selling in bulk. And it's one thing if you're buying iPhones or you're buying garage door openers. You buy it, you stick it in your warehouse, you ship it to the owner, you make up your markup, and if one fails, you replace it. But tubes are a specialized thing. Buy tubes from a tube vendor. Hey, Scott W. Thoughts on magnetone amps? They're pretty good. I think they're overpriced, but they're pretty good. The Twilighter is a deluxe reverb circuit with the magnetone tremolo added. So it is not really a magnetone historic circuit, though it does have the magnetone tremolo circuit. So it's odd to me that they are just sticking their tremolo in a straight Fender deluxe reverb clone. They should have built the magnetone circuit, because the old magnetones which had that circuit didn't have a Fender for front end or back end on it. So magnetones are fine. I think if Billy Gibbons wasn't using them in videos, people would not seek them out as much. I think they're better amps for the price. But the Twilighter, the thing about the magnetone with that tremolo is they're the only ones who have the varistor that enables that effect to be made. So if it really matters a lot to you, sure, it's worth it. But I wish they had made an old magnetone circuit as opposed to sticking the magnetone tremolo in a otherwise straight Fender copy. I would just I would look on the Tube Store or Tube Depot and see what 12BH7s they have in stock, and I'm sure they've got some new old stocks. That's a pretty common tube on a 12BH7. Hey, Johnny Guitars. Any speaker upgrade recommendations for 20-watt cock Fender style that will give me a nice and full blues tone? I have two. I don't know what speaker you have in there, and I don't know what speaker you prefer. And what the hell is a blues tone? I ask you this from Memphis, Tennessee. The blues tone, I see that all the time online, and I'm not singling you out. If I go to a club in this town, I'll be hear the most authentic blues you'll ever hear in your life, and I'll be the only white guy there. Odds are they're playing like an old PV Rage or something with whatever, and the speaker may or may not have tears in it, and they may be playing the wrong guitar into the wrong amp, but they have a hard life and they play blues. Meanwhile, I can go down to whatever band's sitting in at BB King's, and they're going to have a 59 Les Paul reissue plugged in a 59 Bassman reissue, or maybe in a 59 Bassman, and doing blues tone, but it just sounds, they're playing Sweet Home Chicago and Dust My Broom again, and everyone's sick of it. So I'm a little bit over blues tone, blues speaker, blues marketing. Tom Waits does blues and doesn't even use an electric guitar. And it's not a 145, but Tom Waits does blues. So maybe I'm the wrong person to ask. But, if you get an ET65 or a Creamback 65 in a Fender amp, and you can't get the sounds you're looking for when playing blues, then you just don't wake up the next morning. Sorry, that's a pet peeve of mine. I'm not singling you out, Johnny. I'm just a twitch. I get the twitch, What? How can I buy the blues? How can I buy the authentic blues? Well, go pick up trash starting at 3 a.m. for no money for 15 years. Maybe you'll get some blues in your life. Sorry. Hey, Warlock, I answered some questions about tubes in the second hour, I believe. Those answers still stand. Do I like any of the Marshall in a box style pedals? I'm sure they're great for some players. I've not tried one that I really thought did what I wanted it to do. And you know, I'm persnickety. Anything you should watch out for regarding the ground scheme of a Soldana? Build it exactly like Mike built it. So if you're going to copy Mike, copy everything Mike did. Own up to the fact that it's just a copy. But there's no wheel that needs reinventing in that damn thing. Do it exactly like Mike did it. You'll be fine. Lager or ale? Depends on the temperature. On a really hot sunny day, I like a lager. The rest of the time, I like an ale. Hey, Casimir Kid, thank you for the second super chat. Based on my advice last week, I'm considering getting a vibroverb for the Fender Clean Sound at around 50 watts, more headroom for jazz playing. Is there any modern equivalent you like? Well, I don't think there is anything that's quite the vibroverb on the market these days. How much clean headroom do you need? I mean, I'm trying to think of the last time I heard a jazz guy who wasn't playing with a drummer who used brushes. You know, you need to be as loud as the drummer typically. And I don't know that you'd ever get to use a 50 watt that much louder. You know, similar to my thing on the blues thing, what's a jazz amp? You know, I'm not a jazz player. If Joe Restivo were here with his 175 or whatever, he could plug in this Tremino and kill you with amazing jazz tones because the amp is a good foundation for music. If Tim Lurch had this Telecaster into that amp, that's fake Jim Hall, but more of a playing your fingers. Need to clean that pot. I'd say that if you have a jazz gig where you need more than a deluxe reverb, have your backline rent another deluxe reverb. Most jazz guys are never gonna need more than a deluxe reverb because the deluxe reverb will keep up with the drummer. And I'm talking like if you're gonna go hear the guy just slamming mostly brushes, very light sticks on a Gretsch kit, a deluxe reverb is fine for that. But if you need more, rent a second one. I wouldn't recommend 50 watts for most jazz gigs unless you're bringing back my Vishnu Orchestra. Issue is all my pots are scratchy. You only get better after turning or cleaning them for a short time until they get scratchy again. Sometimes it's not the pot. Sometimes you have DC in your board. It builds up, and turning the pot a few times kind of dissipates it, but that resistance builds back up. But sometimes you just need to change pots. Thank you, CJ. Appreciate that. I don't know that Beale Street has ever been fun, Mooney Dub. I mean, unless you're, you know, maybe you were back in the day. Unless it's just, unless your idea is fun is just getting shit faced and paying too much for fried chicken and watered down drinks. Beale Street's not much fun. Michael Lulu, I answered two different questions about the JTM 45 2250 45. Check back. T777 says, I'll send you a 57 custom champ for review. Now, that sounds like a threat to me. If this man is threatening me, I feel so triggered. Let's see. I was going through Navy school from 76 to 78. Remember seeing a small house with a Cadillac in front of a tall pole with a TV antenna. You're talking about Memphis, Victor? I think you're talking about this house over on Peabody. It's not that small a house, but rather small. They've got a huge ham radio tower outside. Hey, Keith, thanks for joining us, man. And we can't have a ham radio tower that big anymore, but it looks like the old RKO logo. It's pretty tall. But they got grandfathered in. It's no longer operating, but the antenna is still there. Maybe what you're talking about. Am I seeing the Jack White amps failing? I haven't had any come in. I probably won't see any until they're out of warranty, so another year and a half before the first ones start leaving warranty. I don't expect to find much inside of note, good, but have not had one come in. On the topic of champs, which one do I recommend? The Mojitone and the StewMac are the same kit. I don't have experience with TAD. Avoid any kits from China. Get the Mojitone or the StewMac. No experience of a Tone King Imperial preamp. I'm sorry, I'm trying to, if I sound like I'm rushing through, I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anyone's questions in this last 20 minutes. So what I think of the Friedman Vintage Plex 50-watt amp. Hey, Sean, I've not tried that one. Based on every other Friedman I've tried, I'm sure it's fantastic, but I've not tried that one. I think that, is that what Jeff's using? Jeff's saying he's got the JEL, okay. No, Dave's not going to put a bad Marshall style amp out on the market. I'm sure it's fantastic. Is most of the guitar audio we hear on YouTube stereo? The stuff that's, if you listen to that pedal show, yeah. And if you listen to stuff where they're showing stereo delays and reverbs and all that, yeah. I do all my stuff in mono because there's no need for stereo in this. Technically, the reverb on this, the plate reverb on this is a stereo reverb, but I have the guitar up the center because I don't know what people are listening through this on, and I just can't. I want it to be as consistent as possible, and mono's fine. If I were demonstrating a stereo effect, then I would do the stereo in that, but usually mono is good. Is it worth the extra money for matched tubes? Not for preamp tubes. Maybe if you're doing some hi-fi stuff, you need some stereo phase inverters. Yeah, that would make sense. But in guitar amps, no. The only thing you're matching is the power tubes. I don't have anything negative to say about your Fender Mustang 3 Mooney Dub, except that I hope it never has a problem because Fender does not support that line of amps. Snake Fascinated, the Trainer YBA2 is a phenomenal amp for guitar. Now it says bassmate combo. I've not tried a combo version of that. My God, that would be heavy. But the YBA2 bassmate is a fantastic guitar amp. What is the best 15 to 20 watt 2-channel Marshall style amp without buying the bank? You mean 2 channels as two separate inputs, like on a Plexi where you have a high treble and a normal, or do you mean 2-channel as in here's my clean, here's my dirty? And without buying the bank, I don't know what that is for you, because you can get a Freeman 68, you can get the Sur 68, you can get this a Germino. Those will all be variants of the best. They're all going to be slightly different from each other. But if none of those are 2 channels and clean and dirty, well, you can get maybe the Freeman Runt kind of thing, or the Jake E. Lee, I think, has got some option for that. But most of the guys aren't, except for Sur, aren't really doing a lot of channel changing stuff. Some of the higher, more expensive Freemans do that. But maybe a Freeman Runt 20 might be the best entry into a Marshall style amp. Certainly better than anything Marshall's made since about 1993. Going to need a fresh soldering iron. Preferences for most people, the Hakko FX-951 is the way to go, I believe, unless there's a newer model. It's hard to keep track of that. I've got a fancy one, but I solder more than the average human does. What makes the Brown Deluxe sound different from all the other Fenders? Hey, Will Schaff, a lot. Brad, no, sorry, not Brad. Zach Childs did a pretty good overview of that earlier this week in his Ask Zach, where he talks about the 62 Deluxe. Watch that, because that'll pretty much tell you everything you need to know from a musician's point of view. And it takes him about 25 minutes to do that. And so I'm going to let him do it rather than me repeat that here. It's impossible to get guitar perfectly in tune. Yeah, but you can at least try. Yeah, we're really behind the chat. Hello, Cleveland. I'll talk about computer networking another time. I'm sure that I'm barely got to get caught up to all the questions. Were I surprised the purists said what they found in Hendrix's amp was widely unexpected? Nah, because it's a great headline, number one. Number two, how long did Hendrix use those amps? How many of them did he knock off the cabinet while doing the stage show and were fixed by some guy in the back of a Radio Shack in 1969? So, you know. Mojito makes the Deluxe reverb head cabinet is as simple as unscrewing the amp part of the Deluxe from the combo and screwing it. It is as simple as that, but the issue is you have to make sure that the head cabinet is like that tall. Otherwise, the reverb tank will be too close to the transformers. But it is that simple. Hey, Uncle Ike, I just didn't see it the first time. I'm sorry. I wasn't passing you over intentionally. Even with the question marks, sometimes I just don't see them. It's never, occasionally I'll skip over a question deliberately because there'll be something rude or whatever. But no, I did not mean to. You didn't do anything wrong. I just missed it. I'm sorry. I don't know why. I'm scrolling using the little wheel on my mouse, and sometimes I think I hit it too fast and it zips. Just missed it. I'm sorry. The big channels have a guy sitting over there with an iPad feeding all the stuff, making the stuff pop up on screen and all that stuff. And, and monitoring the audio. So if the audio gets distorted, they know about it instantly. I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. So sorry if I missed things. I did not mean to. I have no thoughts on the Mark VII, Old Hickory. Thank you for joining us today. I've not enjoyed any of the Mark 1 through 5, though the 2's got some strengths. But I don't have any experience with the Mark VII. Sorry. Changing back from EL34 to 6550, what bias voltage range should I be going for? What is my recommendation for a good, reliable set of EL34s? Well, if you're changing from 34s to 6550s, why do you want a new set of 34s? 34s depends on whether you want the best sound or the most reliability. Like you can get JJ EL34Ls that are really reliable, but they sound a little bit more like a 6L6. I've had really good luck with the Mullard reissue EL34s as far as sounding right, and I've not had any reliability issues with them, but they're not as reliable typically as the 34Ls. And there's some others that take higher plate voltage. Bias voltage range to be going for. Basically, I want to make sure that any Marshall I have in, for 34s, I want to go between 30 and 50. But for 6550s, I might want to go between 35 and 55. And if you want to, you can fine tune it and narrow it more than that. But 6550s, I might expect to find myself in the 40s when it's bias corrected. With EL34s, I would expect to find myself somewhere in the 30s, negative 30s. But I don't want a bias range that will accommodate either tube or any tube, because then it's really hard to fiddly to dial it in because the trim pot jumps past the point where you want. Whereas if you have a relatively narrow range available on the trim pot, then it's much easier to dial it in. So. I said hello back earlier, but I'm popping up on the screen, Evo Bass, in case you're still here. I know everyone likes to see their name on the screen. I do when I'm on other streams. I don't know why you think I can get enough of it on this thing, but we all like that little sense of being seen. So I got the classic 54x10 in the mail. It's a good amp. It's not perfect, but you should be a good amp for a good long while. It's good to know how crappy the pickups in my Squire Nashville Telly are. The sparkle thing is some kind of adjustment to the tone stack or feedback loop. I'm not sure what you're asking on that, Jesse. Sorry. The sparkle thing. I don't know what that is. If you mean the present circuit, that's in the feedback. I think the Classic 50 might have done it a different way. Anyway, let's see. An actual 64 Deluxe Reverb is nowhere near as expensive as a 64 Stratocaster. Well, thank God, because I'll tell you a secret. A really good new guitar into a great 64 Deluxe Reverb will sound better than a 64 Strat into a crappy amp. Thanks, man. B15s are fun to work on. I don't get to see them very often, obviously, but they are fun. Yeah, I would avoid. I'm not a fan of the PV 5150. It's better than the Fender made EVH amps, but they're not very good. I mean, they're better built than the Mesas, but if you want that sound, get the Soldano SLO 100. It's the good amp, even though it doesn't have Van Halen's name on it. I cannot recommend either of them, even if you get them used for a good price, because they're going to need $400 or $500 worth of work, and expect to replace the muting transistors all the time. Sean Eric Brooks, I do plan to continue the series of best amps at various price points, but by the time since I've done the first two, those prices are no longer realistic, and every time I research a third video, the prices change. So it's really hard to do that because the prices are changing all the damn time. Like if I had done a video 6 months ago on prices have all gone up 20-30% on most things since 6 months ago. But again, we're not supposed to talk about that. Hey, Casper, is there anything I recommend reading to learn more about Fender amps for making an informed decision on how to get the best tone out of them? Man, the best thing to do is get one and sit down and fiddle with stuff and listen and see how this interacts and just find out how it works. There's no substitute for experience when it comes to this kind of thing. And once you learn a deluxe reverb, you'll pretty much understand all the similar reverb model amps. Just remember that Leo designed them to sound good with the treble and bass and mid, if present, at noon. So start there. If it's too bright, turn this down. If it's too dark, turn it up. Remember that they're interactive. So I could step you through it right now, and you'd learn less than if you just spent 5 minutes fiddling with the knobs yourself. Oh, one thing I see a lot. Clients will come in, and I'll hand them a guitar into their freshly finished amp, and the first thing they'll do is they'll turn when I hand them the guitar, the volume's off because I turn the volume down subconsciously when I'm done playing. And they'll roll it up to 3 or 4 and try to play and get a sound. And that's not the way to get a good sound. Now, you can intentionally roll down on the volume of your guitar for specific sounds, but if you're down here like at 3 or 4, you're giving a really weak signal to the amp, and here's your signal and here's your noise floor, and they're right next to each other. Whereas if you turn the volume of the guitar up, here's your signal and your noise is down here. So if I turn up this Germino, so that on 10, it was Van Halen, yeah, I could roll down to like 4 on here and get the Van Halen clean. That's a different thing than if you're going to a deluxe reverb, in which case this is dark and muddy and you have a bad noise ratio. Don't be afraid to turn the volume up. So many guys don't ever have the right signal to noise ratio coming from their guitars. Because the noise in the amp is always going to be here. So it's your choice whether to give it signal here or give it signal here. Let's see. How long do I think it takes a tube amp to fully warm up to reach its optimal sound? 3, a 1, a 2, a 3. Crunch. It depends on the amp, depends on the tubes. To reach its optimal sound, what is optimal? I mean, it's going to sound better 10 minutes after it's been on, and it's usually going to sound better in the second set, but is the second set, I can't tell you how long is exactly going to be optimal. But I'm not going to make anyone wait an hour and 45 minutes because the amp's not as warm as it could be. And also, the more you play, the faster it's going to reach its optimal sound. So, thank you, Johan. Appreciate that very much. And thank you, Hello Cleveland. What are my thoughts on a Studer Badger 35? They're awesome. They're great. If you like the Vox thing that's a little hairier, a little more towards the Marshall thing, the Badger 35 is great. I will talk. I only have like 6 minutes, and I've got a bunch of questions to get through. Even with a super chat, I will come back and we'll talk about computer networking background. But I was technical escalations at IBM for their ThinkPads for a couple years, and then I did IT work for the Navy for about 1.5 years, and then I was freelance until the computer industry kind of crashed in 2001. I was doing a lot of networking and databases and website design, and I don't miss it. Hey, Jeff, when I turn on one of my two rocks, it makes a loud hum, then it fades out and works normally. Just started today. Power tube, I'm assuming. It don't see anything visually going on with the tubes. It's probably a power tube, and that a power tube on one side is taking longer to come up to full current than the other, which means that while one is operating and the other one's still warming up, you don't have any common mode cancellation in the output, so you're hearing that hum. That's the most likely thing. It's probably not a problem in the amp itself, or it wouldn't fade away. It is probably one or more output tube. If it's your 50, it's one of your 6L6s or one of your 34s. Can I explain the subject of headroom and wattage? Ooh, as well as overall volume. Headroom is different from the volume, but they say high headroom amps like Twins are too loud. Volume is the loudest sound the amp is capable of making. You know, it just can't get any louder than that. But whether that loud sound is a clean sound or a dirty sound is the amount of headroom. Like with a super ultralinear twin, it's 135 watts. That 135 watts is measured clean, and it is painfully loud and very clean until very high in its range. But remember that it goes even louder than 135 watts. It's just not clean anymore. Whereas a 50 watt Marshall, when it's clean, is only 50 watts. But its clean is not towards the top of its volume range. Its volume range gets almost as loud as that 135 watt clean Fender. But by the time the Marshall gets to that volume level, it's well into the dirt. Meanwhile, you have, say, an AC-15. and it does not get as loud as the Marshall or the Fender, and it has a gain level gain level change more like the Marshall, where it's clean, 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 then gets to breakup, then gets to dirt. But its clean is not much quieter than its distorted stuff. Whereas the Marshall, when it gets really distorted, it's going to be a lot louder than its clean, if that makes sense. So they are different things. It's hard to describe unless I had 3 different kinds of amp setups just to show that. Hey, Dustin, I'm glad you made it. Do I have an opinion on the ABR1 versus the 2-Nomatic bridges? Well, ABR1s are 2-Nomatics, CF Fantastic. Do you mean versus the Nashville? I like the ABR1 better than the 2-Nomatic, but my favorite are the modern ABR variants, which is in the other room. I like the Faber ABR1 variant because it doesn't have that little bit of metal holding everything in place. It gets loose when it always vibrates and bends and buzzes, and I don't have to fiddle with it as much with nail polish to keep it from being noisy. Let's see, trying to make sure I don't miss anything that I can get to. I don't always get to every question in the end of the chat, but I try. 2-Rocks are great, Jonathan Rowland. 2-Rocks aren't like Morgans or Mesas. There's no evil plan to take advantage of people. They're expensive because they got they have a small team of employees, and they have bills, and they have to pay for the cardboard boxes and the shipping, and they have health insurance and dental and fun stuff like that. And it's a niche thing. If they sold more, the price would come down. So if everyone would go buy a 2-Rock, then your second 2-Rock will cost less, right? It's just the way a small business works. You're selling something really good, you're going to sell fewer of them because fewer people can afford them. And so since fewer people can afford them, you can't order 1,000 chassis. You have to order 500 chassis. So each chassis costs more. And, it is what it is, but no one's being taken advantage of. If the amp produces the sound that's right for you, and they've got a lot of different models, it is a very good thing to have. Hey, Dan Brock, I'm very glad. Thank you very much. Old Hickory 42. I have, it's cool. I have a Mesa playlist if you're daring. I would not buy a Super Champ Harry Williamson, especially the 80 Super Champs. I find them very problematic. Lord Grog, I have the V1 Flint, and I tried the V2, and I'm talking with very high-end power power supplies, including the Strymon power supply. The V1 hisses. I don't recall how much better, if any better, the V2 was. I remember the V2 didn't hiss on the tremolo, but it hissed on the reverb. Let's see. Preferred method for cleaning really dirty Tolex. We'll take the amp out so that you're not going to get any water on the amp itself. McGuire's makes some real good products for cleaning plastics in cars, and a very soft bristle toothbrush, and warm water and patience. That will do most of it. Peach Eater, I don't have the 6G3 schematic in front of me or in my head, so I can't answer that right now. I'm trying to wrap this up. It's not simple green. Be careful, simple green. It can damage plastics, and it's really hard on your skin. It's a great degreaser, but it's not what I would suggest to use on Tolex or lungs. Let's see. I'm not going to be able to get to all the questions this week. I really appreciate everyone being here. It means a lot to me. It's I see channels where the guy or girl is putting out great content and doing everything right, and they've got 1,500 subscribers, and they'll do a live stream and they'll have 7 people. And I don't know why. I have been lucky. I have no idea why I've been so lucky to win the algorithm prize or whatever. But don't think for a minute that I take it for granted or that I don't appreciate you or know how lucky I've been. It's thank you, Oz. Appreciate that, man. It's amazing how lucky I've been to reach this audience, and I appreciate you very much. And I'm sorry that I will not be able to get to every question at the end of the chat today. Maybe some other day. Whoa, thank you, Cat's Music Journey. Maybe another time we'll do a 4-hour stream, but I've got to go to the grocery store. Come to Copenhagen. I would love to come to Copenhagen. Thank you very much, Cat's Music Journey. I hope to make it back to Europe at some point. I think our next one is going to probably be Amsterdam, and then Brussels and Bruges and The Hague and maybe Lille, and work our way through the Normandy coast. And then after that, we need to go to Madrid. We've got to go to the Prado before we're too old to do such things. But I would love to also make it to Copenhagen someday. If I had my druthers, I'd snap my fingers and be traveling all the time. I'd come back here just enough to water the plants or something. But for some reason, I've got to work for a living. Keith just got another ombre. Nice. Yeah, they're very good apps. Well, I will go back and read all the comments and questions at the very end of today's chat afterwards. I'm sorry that I missed you all in real time, so to speak. Or as Macrolane would say, just get a Princeton and turn the knobs. Absolutely. If you can't do it with a Princeton, you need to practice some more. Thank you very much, Rob Platt. I appreciate that. Means a lot. Especially as coffee gets more and more expensive. I'm going to make a fresh pot after this, though. It is cold and rainy here, and I'm over it already. I still have a sore throat, though I'm able to breathe again after the experience 2 weeks ago. All right. I reached the end so far. I appreciate you all for being here. I'm going to remember to push this button before I end it so that it gives that nice little passive-aggressive nag to hit the like button. But if you could give it a like before you go, that does mean a lot. It does help. And breathing is good, and so is fresh coffee, and I'm going to go combine the two. Thanks, guys. See you next time.